Chapter 70. The housekeeper, old Pang, stretched out his hand and pulled on a thread behind Jun Tian's armchair. An ear-piercing bell rang throughout the Jun family's courtyard. Then, he silently followed behind Jun Tian, his face cold and resolute. He had already guessed what Jun Tian was going to do next, but he would not stop him. Not only would he not stop him, he would also follow. No complaints, no regrets. Downstairs, a wheelchair quietly sat there. Jun Wui sat upright on it, his two sword-like eyebrows emitting a murderous aura. Seeing his father coming down, Jun Wui's face was expressionless. He met his father's eyes and turned their heads, not saying a word. At this time, there was no need to say anything. Dozens of dark figures rushed over from all directions and stood quietly in 3 rows in the courtyard. They looked at Jun Tian calmly. No matter what Jun Tian wanted to do, these people would follow him until the end of time. Amidst the layers of shadows, there were countless people gathered like ghosts, quietly waiting for orders. The Jun family's hidden forces were mobilized without reservation. Grandpa Jun stepped forward and spoke a few words in a low voice. Then, the hands hidden in the shadows suddenly receded like a receding tide, disappearing without a trace in an instant. It was as though the sky was filled with the stench of blood, and the howling of the wind in the middle of the sky had become even more intense. After standing silently for a while, Jun Tian faced the fresh night wind and took a deep breath. He felt as if he had inhaled a thick stench of blood, choking his lungs. Turning over, Jun Tian mounted his horse. His blood-red cloak fluttered in the night wind, fusing with the color of blood. The rest of the people silently mounted their horses and followed him. Jun Wui patted the armrests of his wheelchair, and his body soared into the air, and steadily landed on the back of a horse. He shook the reins and followed the horse. The sound of hoofbeats gradually faded away, and eventually disappeared. In a flash, the military headquarters was brightly lit. Jun Tian, dressed in his military uniform, sat upright in the main hall. Outside, 40 drums sounded at the same time. As the drums sounded, a continuous stream of people dressed in military uniforms, helmets and armors, galloped over. When they reached the platform, they dismounted from their horses and stood as straight as javelins. More and more people came, but none of them said a word. They only looked at Jun Tian, who was sitting high up in the commander's seat. Their eyes were filled with incomparable fanaticism. "Old Marshal, it's been a long time since I last beat the General Assembly drum. Those years when the flames of war raged through the skies, how nostalgic!" The drum stopped. Below the stage, many generals stood solemnly. On both sides, dozens of large flags fluttered in the night wind, as if 1,000 people were crying at the same time. Jun Tian got up from his seat and walked to the stage. His sharp eyes swept across the crowd as he asked, "Is there anyone who hasn't arrived yet? We are all here. We await the old marshal's orders." Hundreds of people shouted in unison. "All right. Let this old man do something earth-shattering tonight." Jun Tian's sharp eyes emitted an unconcealable killing intent. "Listen up, generals. Here. Chen Zhonan. Here. I order you to lead your troops and guard the west gate. Without my order, no one is allowed to leave the city. If there is any disturbance, immediately send troops to suppress it." Jun Tian emphasized the word anyone. "Yes. Jun Yanfeng. Here. You are in charge of the east gate." "Yes." Zhan Tingtian. Here. "North gate." "Yes." "Chan Linyu. Here. "South gate." "The rest of you follow me." A series of orders were issued. Everyone stepped forward to receive the token and turned to leave. No one asked why. These were all Jun Tian's former subordinate. They were also the backbone of the Jun family's military. They had always followed Jun Tian's orders without any questions, even if it meant death. Especially Chen Zhonan, Zhan Tingtian, Chan Linyu, and Jun Yanfeng. They were Grandpa Jun's 4 most capable generals. They were also unruly and iron-blooded war maniacs. They only obeyed Jun Tian's orders, regardless of whether they were right or wrong. They were also the backbone of the Jun family's military. One by one, the generals received their orders and left. Jun Tian's eyes grew colder and colder. Monsieur, your grandfather will avenge you. Anyone who has ever gone against you, anyone who is suspicious, will be buried with you tonight. Just as the war drums started, late at night, in the imperial palace, the emperor of Tianxiang Kingdom, Yang Huaiyu, jumped up in shock and shouted, "What is that sound?" This emperor, who was once in the prime of his life, felt an inexplicable sense of danger. It was as if something earth-shattering was happening. Outside the bedchamber, a feminine voice said, "Your Majesty, it seems like the sound of war drums." The sound of war drums? The emperor frowned and was suddenly shocked. War drums? The general's gathering drum. His expression changed. He got off the bed and draped a cloak over his body. Wearing only his undergarments, he quickly walked out and listened for a while. His expression gradually became solemn. Jun Tian. The emperor could immediately tell that it was Jun Tian's war drums. Apart from Jun Tian's general's gathering drum, there was no other sound in the capital that was as majestic and tragic as this. Only Jun Tian's war drums could display such power, enough to shake the entire Tianxiang city. What the hell happened today? This emperor does not know. The emperor's face darkened as he slowly asked. At this moment anything could be done, but he could not be anxious. Only by knowing what had happened could he understand why Jun Tian would beat the general's gathering drum at this time. Only then could he adopt a targeted strategy to resolve the situation. This servant does not know. The 6 servants beside him knelt down at the same time, none of them able to answer. Investigate. Reporting to your Majesty, this servant remembers that Princess Ling Meng had requested an audience with your Majesty 2 hours ago. I do not know what the matter is. A middle-aged eunuch cautiously stepped forward from behind the emperor and replied in a feminine voice. Raimu? What happened to her? Raimu has always been well-behaved. If there was nothing important, she would not disturb me at this time. Why didn't she report it to me? Who dares to be so bold as to interfere in this matter? The emperor immediately realized that something was wrong. The eunuch stammered, unable to speak. His eyes kept drifting towards the bedroom. Quickly summon Raimu. Yes. Concubine Meng. Come out. The emperor roared angrily, and a beautiful woman covered in fine muslin walked out and knelt on the ground. Let me ask you, why did Raimu come to see me? Why did you stop me? The emperor's eyes were as cold as ice, without the slightest bit of warmth. The princess, she said that she was assassinated, but this concubine saw that she was unharmed, and her mannerisms were the same as usual. I only knew that it was a child's mischief. Besides, your Majesty had already fallen asleep at that time, so this concubine did not dare to disturb you. Concubine Meng replied, trembling with fear. My daughter was assassinated, and you still stopped her from seeing me, her father. You actually dared to cause trouble? Ha ha ha, you are truly my beloved concubine. The emperor's tone was gentle, as if he did not take it seriously at all. However, concubine Meng, who was kneeling on the ground, was already trembling. She knew that once the emperor spoke in such a tone, someone's head would definitely fall to the ground. The emperor gently moved closer to her ear and whispered, I think you don't have the guts to do it yourself. However, the matter that eldest brother promised you is definitely not going to be fulfilled. I will not let him do it either. Concubine Meng immediately widened her eyes in fear, and her whole body collapsed to the ground. Take concubine Meng away, banish her to the cold palace, and await punishment. No one is allowed to come into contact with her. The emperor was very calm, but he announced the fate of concubine Meng, who was once above tens of thousands of people. Father! Princess Raimu hurried over, her hair a little messy. Don't be anxious. What happened today? Come, tell Imperial Father everything. Tell me in detail. The Emperor looked at his daughter and smiled benevolently, as if nothing had happened. The coldness in his eyes was subtly hidden. Chapter 71. Following Princess Raimu's narration, the Emperor's face became more and more solemn, and his eyes became colder and colder. He lowered his head and did not make a sound, only listening quietly. This involved his daughter's life and death, and it also involved another key person. This person did not affect the overall situation, but because of him, the consequences were too great, so great that he, the Emperor, might not be able to bear it, let alone be willing to bear it. An emperor, his own daughter was assassinated, and yet he was concerned about another standard debauchee. No kin in the royal family? It was really sad. Finally, according to Meng before the assassination, June Moxie had reported to you? At least it was a warning? The Emperor pondered. Yes, although I am not sure, June Moxie's motive should not be suspicious, or he might have found some clues. Princess Raimu's voice was low, but her tone was firm. Clues? With June Moxie's insignificant cultivation, how could he have found any clues? Forget it, these are all minor details. Later on, June Moxie was rescued by another expert, which means that June Moxie did not die, right? The Emperor's eyes deepened. Yes, father, Princess Raimu knew the Emperor's taboo, so she did not mention Yigahan's name. Even though the Emperor himself knew about this matter. If that is the case, then why did Jun Tian go crazy? He actually beat the general's gathering drum without a care. The Emperor pondered. His grandson is not dead, and the Jun family is not at the point of no descendants. Then his actions this time are really puzzling. This is really... He stood up and slowly paced 2 steps, his fingers lightly tapping on his forehead, and said slowly, My grandson is not dead, but Jun Tian went crazy for no reason. Perhaps one thing is certain, June Moxie is definitely not home at this moment. Jun Tian must have received the news that his grandson was in danger, and he did not see his grandson return for a long time, so he behaved strangely. Looks like I've underestimated them? How many birds do I need to kill with one stone? His Majesty smiled coldly. Princess Raimu suddenly thought of something, and her face turned pale. If that was really the case, although it was just a misunderstanding, the consequences would be unmanageable. If June Moxie's life wasn't in danger at that time, why didn't he send someone to inform the June family? Meng you handled this matter too carelessly. Meng do you remember anything? Seeing the huge change in Princess Lingmeng's face, the Emperor smiled and tried his best to control his anger. However, the corners of his eyebrows showed signs of being unable to be suppressed. His daughter had always handled matters calmly. How could she have made such a blunder today? Could it be that she had lost her usual calmness because of the assassination attempt? Imperial Father, when we found June Moxie's corpse. No, when his body was missing, I sent someone to inform Old Master June. The moment the messenger left, that old man came and carried the injured June Moxie away. Princess Raimu was at a loss, unable to speak. And then? The news had already been sent, but when you found out that June Moxie was not dead, did you not do anything to remedy the situation? His Majesty looked at his daughter in disappointment, but his heart skipped a beat. Old man? Could it be that there was someone else besides that bastard Yi Gohan who was secretly protecting my daughter? If that's the case, His Majesty thought to himself, but his face remained expressionless. Such an important piece of news naturally had to be remedied. At that time, my imperial bodyguards were all seriously injured, so I had Murong Qianjun send someone to inform Old Master June that June Moxie was not dead. If Old Master June did not receive the news that June Moxie was not dead, then the only possibility is... There is no need for that possibility. It is obvious that Murong Qianjun did not go to deliver the news. Or perhaps, he only went to deliver the news of Jun Moxie's death. Otherwise, he would not. His Majesty sighed, and a sinister expression appeared on his handsome face, but it quickly disappeared. There is nothing else for you to do, go and rest. As he said that, he stroked Raimu's hair, and his empty eyes looked at the hazy yellow color of the imperial palace. His Majesty suddenly felt that this yellow color, which represented nobility, was actually very glaring to the eyes, and very vexing to the heart. This assassination attempt is a little strange, ha ha. How unexpected. His Majesty pondered for a moment, and a sharp glint flashed across his eyes. Perhaps it is time to wash the imperial palace. I wonder if it will look a little brighter if I wash it with human blood? In the distance, the earth-shattering sound of the war drums had already died down, but the atmosphere was still filled with an oppressive atmosphere. I hope, Jun Zhantian, I hope you will not make things too difficult for me. His Majesty's eyes revealed a complicated expression, and it disappeared in a flash. Looking at his daughter's departing figure, His Majesty stood with his hands behind his back, and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he said, "Shadow, go out and take a look. Do not make a move unless it is necessary. Tell Jun Zhantian that his grandson is not dead. It is fine to cause a ruckus, but do not go overboard. Bring me something on the way. It is convenient. That old thing has been holding back for a few years." After saying that, His Majesty wrote a few words, rolled it up, and handed it over. "Go." A gust of wind rose, and a seemingly formless figure floated out. The next moment, the slip of paper in His Majesty's hand disappeared, and a faint shadow flew out of the imperial palace. "Although I am letting you be presumptuous this time, I also want to borrow a knife," His Majesty whispered to himself, and a trace of a meaningful smile suddenly flashed across his face. His Majesty had always taken every possibility into account, but this time, he had far underestimated the extent of Jun Zhantian's rage. Moreover, it was already too late for him to send someone over now. Men, summon Great General Dugawudi. His Majesty let out a sigh of relief and said loudly, I might as well throw the situation into chaos again. Hope, one by one. As long as one understands, they will restrain themselves a little. Those who do not understand, naturally do not have the need to stay, or perhaps do not have the qualifications to stay. It is not that I do not allow you to fight, but only those who fight will be the strongest. But there must be a sense of propriety in fighting. If he went beyond this limit, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. Princess Raimu bade farewell to His Majesty, and it was only when she returned to her own palace that she suddenly remembered that ever since she had gone, His Majesty had been asking about the Jun family and Jun Moxie throughout the entire assassination process. His Majesty, who had always doted on her the most, had not even asked about the fact that she was the main target of the assassination. Why is this? Could it be that, in his father's heart, this assassination, which was full of suspicions, involved a princess, and involved him? Even the major cases involving other members of the imperial family are not as important as the Jun family? Or is His Majesty avoiding something? Or thinking of His Majesty's deep gaze, Princess Raimu could not help but tremble. Fortunately, I have Uncle Ye's protection, and that mysterious expert. While in a daze, Princess Raimu reached into her bosom, and took out the 3 small and exquisite throwing knives, and played with them in her hands. The throwing knives were only half the size of a palm, and their slightly curved curves were beautiful and natural, as thin as a cicada's wings. Even when the 3 throwing knives were stacked together, they were only a thin layer. Princess Lingmeng was very curious. How could such a small flying dagger display such a terrifying power? It was capable of causing a group of cold-blooded killers to flee without a fight. The throwing knives were silent, and their bodies flashed with a sparkling luster, and under the light, they were extremely dazzling. If one only saw this kind of throwing knife, they would definitely think that it was something used by children from rich families to play with. Who would have thought that it was a deadly weapon of a peerless expert? But, as long as this kind of unique throwing knife appears in front of me again, I will immediately recognize it. Princess Raimu thought happily, and her heart was filled with endless fascination. I wonder what kind of person this peerless expert, whom even Uncle Yi admires so much, is? This chapter has been going over and over again since this morning, and has been revised countless times. I don't feel very satisfied. When it comes to this kind of climax, it is perhaps the most difficult time for all writers, haha. Although my head hurts from thinking about it, I also feel a sense of accomplishment. Could this be pain and happiness at the same time? Regarding the issue of updating, I hope my brothers and sisters can understand again. Chapter 72. Great General Dugawudi returned home with a belly full of depression. He was already completely confused. When he heard the war drums from the barracks outside the city, he immediately rushed back to the city with his personal guards. The first thing he did was to wait for the emperor to summon him to the imperial palace. He had even given the order for his soldiers to prepare for battle. In the event that Jun Tian were to revolt, only the Dugu family's army could protect the emperor and contend against Jun Tian's army. However, His Majesty's unusually warm attitude left Dugawudi scratching his head in confusion. Such a serious matter could cause great changes in the country at any time. Even the imperial palace was not an impossibility. But the emperor had only said 4 words, "Don't be impatient." Then he told me to go home and find my old man. He didn't even allow me to return to the barracks or take any defensive measures. This is too unimaginable. Dugawudi fainted. Dugawudi returned home with a belly full of depression. He did not even have time to return to his courtyard. The first thing he did was to find his father, Dugu Zongheng. But the result was that Dugawudi, the great general who commanded thousands of troops, was even more embarrassed. "Are you a pig? You bastard! You dragged me out of bed just for this trivial matter? You unfilial son! How did I raise such a useless thing? Don't go out and call yourself my son. I can't afford to lose my face." Dugawudi was very angry. His voice was so loud that the entire residence could hear him. Spittle sprayed all over his son's face. He pointed at Dugawudi's forehead, causing him to stagger. "Don't you use your pig brain to think? Is your brain filled with dog shit? Rebellion? Bullsh *t. I'm telling you, even if my Dugu family revolts, Jun Tian will not. Even if His Majesty revolts, Jun Tian will not rebel. Hurry up and go back to sleep. I can't be bothered with you. You're a complete pig. Stupid pig. Motherf *cur. Finally, he kicked Dugawudi out of his room. Dugawudi returned to his bedroom angrily. A muffled groan followed by a voice. "Old thing? What did you just say? What the F *ck? Who the F *ck was invincible? If he's a pig, who the hell are you, you old thing? Was his brain filled with dog shit? You pig! You're a pig through and through." What followed was a series of muffled groans that were forcefully held back in order to save face. Great General Dugawudi rubbed his buttocks, his face full of resentment. He thought bitterly in his heart, "I'll twist this old thing. Serves you right." Confused, he returned to his own courtyard, only to find that it was noisy and brightly lit. Madame and the concubines of the third branch were not asleep yet, and their faces were full of worry. When they saw him return, they immediately surrounded him. After asking, he found out that his daughter ran back crying in the afternoon. Her tears flowed down, and no one could persuade her. She locked herself in her room and didn't come out until now. It seemed that she had been bullied. The gloomy Dugawudi suddenly became furious. Nothing was going his way. What? Who would dare to bully my precious daughter in the Tianxiang city? See if I don't bring an army to exterminate them. Panting with rage, he led his wives into his daughter's room. He didn't even try to hide it, and coaxed his precious daughter for a long time. Finally, his daughter stopped crying and drank a bowl of bird's nest porridge. Only then was he able to relax. Who was it that bullied my baby? Tell me, and I'll exterminate them. Dugguwudi's face was somewhat sinister. He looked at his daughter's swollen eyes, and couldn't help but feel heartache. A manic voice in his heart shouted, "I'm going to explode." Father, Dugushiawi had been waiting for her father, and said in a spoiled manner, "You have to help your daughter." Dugguwudi suddenly felt that something was wrong. Could it be that my daughter was? He couldn't help but ask nervously, "Who?" "It's the June family. That stinky brat June Moxie. I'm going to die of anger today. Father, you have to help your daughter." Dugushiawi pouted and said in an aggrieved manner. Dugushiawi had been holding it in for a whole day. So, she had been waiting for her father to come back and complain. Then, she would ask for her father's permission to bring her brothers to beat up June Moxie, and take back the meteoric iron. She knew that her mother wouldn't agree, and wouldn't dare to agree. So, she didn't have that idea. Dugguwudi let out a long sigh after listening to what had happened. So, it wasn't like what I thought. Now I can rest assured. Then, he wrinkled his brows, and suddenly felt as if his head was about to explode. He, my good girl, I wouldn't be afraid of anyone else. In fact, I would have caught that prince and beat him up to vent your anger. But this June Emosia isn't easy to deal with. Of course it's not easy. June Jean doesn't know where his grandson is. How can I find him? Even if I find him, I might not dare to do anything. That old bastard had completely gone mad now. Is father afraid of Senior June? My life is so bitter. I'm so angry. Dugushiawi cried again. She turned her body and turned her face away. She didn't know why, but whenever she thought of June Moxie's face, she would want to hit him. She would be so angry that she wished she could slap that hateful smile off his face. Sigh. It's not that. Dugguwudi was at a loss when he saw his daughter crying again. He hastily explained, "It's that brat, Sigh. We don't know whether he's dead or alive. We can't find him. Let's wait until we find him. Father will definitely take revenge for you when we get back. I'll teach that brat a good lesson." Ah? He's reckless? What happened to him? Dugushiawi didn't know why, but she suddenly felt a pain in her heart. She immediately turned around, and stared at her father with her red eyes. She suddenly felt nervous and afraid. What am I afraid of? I heard that Princess Raimu was attacked by an assassin this afternoon. That guy overestimated his own abilities and rushed to report the news. The princess is fine, but that debauchee became the scapegoat. Dugguwudi was rejoicing in his daughter's misfortune. He didn't notice that his daughter's face had turned deathly white as she spoke. Her little hands were clenched tightly, but she still continued to talk. He was stabbed in the chest. Then, a silver Xian assassin stomped on his chest a few times. After that, he was taken away. I don't know where he was taken to. In my opinion, that brat's life is in danger. Dugushiawi groaned. She was dumbstruck. Suddenly, he felt a little empty in his heart. He didn't hear a single word that his father said after that. Even his voice seemed to have become incomparably distant and indistinct. Don't worry. If that brat is still alive, I'll definitely catch him and let my darling personally spank his buttocks. Smash it, ha ha. Dugguwudi laughed heartily. Only then did he realize that there was something wrong with his daughter's expression. He waved his hand in front of his daughter's face. Xiao-yi? Xiao-yi. Ah? Dugushiawi seemed as if she had just woken up from a dream. She was startled. But, her face suddenly calmed down. She slowly lay down on the bed and said in a low voice, "Father, I'm tired. I want to sleep now." "Okay. Then, have a good sleep. Everything will be fine after you wake up. I'll go drink a little wine to relieve my boredom." Today has been a very depressing day. Duguwudi shook his head and walked out. Duguwudi, who had an infinitely thick mental state, didn't realize that there was something wrong with his daughter. Duguxiaoyi pulled the quilt, and covered her entire body with it. She didn't move an inch. She heard her mother say a few words, and her aunts said a few words with concern. However, Duguxiaoyi didn't hear them clearly. Her heart was in a mess. She didn't know what she was thinking. She didn't know why. She just felt like crying. Her nose felt sore and her heart ached. Her tears silently flowed out. More and more, and the quilt became wet. She didn't even know when her mother and aunts had left. Could it be that is he dead? But I haven't. Chapter 73. Jun Tian's face was ashen and his body was full of murderous intent. He strode out of the general selection stage, mounted his horse, and was about to ride away. There were a few places that he wanted to see turn to ashes with his own eyes. Only then would he be able to comfort his grandson's soul in heaven. Suddenly, there seemed to be a ripple in the darkness. A figure darker than the night appeared like a ghost. Although it was right in front of them, no one could see its true appearance. Shadow? Why are you here? Did His Majesty send you here? Jun Tian looked up and asked. This is a gift from His Majesty. The shadow raised his hand, and a piece of white paper floated into Jun Tian's hand. The face in the fog seemed to smile, but it appeared even more strange and frightening. The voice instantly turned into an invisible thread and drilled into Jun Tian's ear. His Majesty said that your grandson should not have perished yet. He also asked me to bring you 2 words. Balance. He emphasized the word balance. His voice was very dry and somewhat reluctant. It seemed that he was not used to saying so many words at once. Xie is not dead? Jun Tian was inexplicably ecstatic. He suddenly thought of the mysterious person he had entrusted. Could it be that he had rescued my grandson? He stepped forward and asked eagerly, Shadow, is my grandson's injury serious? The shadow turned around and was about to leave. It seemed that he did not want to stay even a moment longer. He seemed to have no interest in the number 1 military man in front of him. But when he heard Jun Tian's question, he reluctantly said a few more words. He is not dead, he is seriously injured. After saying that, he turned his head and looked at Junwui, who was beside Jun Tian. He snorted and disappeared with a whoosh. The hope that Jun Tian had just ignited was instantly extinguished by a ball of cold water. He felt his whole body turn cold. Shadow's final glance at Junwui was tantamount to reminding him that with Jun Moxie's injuries, perhaps he wouldn't die, but he wouldn't be any better off than Junwui. Jun Tian's deathly still heart had just become warm when it was doused with icy coldness. Could it be that the only descendant of the Jun family will also become a cripple? As he thought of this, the rage within Grandpa Jun's heart flared up. It was a raging fury. Before this, it seemed that the Meng family and the Li family were always against his grandson. Fuck his grandmother. Regardless of whether or not today's incident had anything to do with you, I'll make an example out of you. Consider yourself unlucky. Jun Tian cursed in his heart as he mounted his horse. Gritting his teeth, he said, Army, follow me. Come with me to search his house. The heavens had pity on him. When the shadow had looked at Junwui, there was no warning as Grandpa Jun had assumed. In fact, there was another reason. This night was destined to be a night of slaughter. Following Jun Tian's soaring rage, the entire imperial capital was shrouded in the smell of blood. War horses galloped back and forth within the imperial capital. One after another, the homes of the imperial court's officials were set ablaze. The sounds of weapons clashing could be heard, as well as miserable screams. Before the shadow had even made his move, countless men in black had already appeared from the darkness like ghosts. Their faces were covered as they jumped into the officials' residences, some of the officials' residences did not even have the time to resist. Their blades fell and blood splattered everywhere. Assistant Minister of Justice Meng Jiu and Li Qiao belonged to the Li family and Meng family's camp. They belonged to the first prince's faction and were usually at odds with the Jun family. Tonight, these two families bore the brunt of the calamity. While the war drums were still beating intensely, several masked men in black had already jumped into the residences of the two families. Starting from the guards' rooms, the corpses rushed into the main hall and then into the bedrooms. The two pitiful officials did not even have the time to speak before their heads were chopped off. Following that, not a single family member was spared. Following that, flames soared to the heavens when Imperial Censor Tai Yen heard the sound of the war drums. This old censor, who had opposed Jun Zhantian for several years because his son had fought alongside Jun Zhantian in the war, was filled with righteous indignation. Thinking that the opportunity to overthrow Jun Zhantian had arrived, he got out of bed and spent the night drafting a memorial to impeach Jun Zhantian. He was only halfway through when suddenly, the doors and windows of the residence were smashed open. Several masked men in black burst in like ghosts. They grabbed the unfinished memorial and looked at it. With a sneer, they curled the memorial into a ball and stuffed it into the poor old man's throat. Then, with a swish of their blades, the memorial was cut into two. The other two families were officials from the Ministry of Rights, Qian Wanguan and Wu Yun, who had defected to the second prince's camp. Their residences were a little far away from the city gate. When they heard the Jun family's drums, they immediately felt that something was amiss. Knowing Grandpa Jun's style, they immediately made a wise decision. They immediately packed their belongings and prepared to leave the city overnight to avoid the storm. However, when they reached the city gates, they were surrounded by the Imperial Army. The leading officer shouted for the assassins to be captured. At the same time, he rained down arrows, not giving them any chance to defend themselves. He immediately gave the order to kill. More than 100 members of the Qian family were turned into porcupines at the southern city gates. Even their faces could not be distinguished on the other side. Nearly 60 members of the Wu family were killed at the western city gate. Their corpses were chopped into pieces. Then, they were doused with kerosene and set ablaze. The stench of burnt corpses filled the entire 9 heavens. Beside the corpses of these two families, 2 tall wooden signs were erected, the fate of the assassins. There was also a single imperial censor, Shen Zhongyun, who had woken up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet. However, he was discovered early in the morning. It was unknown how long he had been holding himself in for. These officials, who normally held high positions of power, were now like a flock of lambs surrounded by a pack of wolves. For a moment, it was as if the end of the world had arrived in the capital. Grandpa Jun's rage had thoroughly ignited the entire imperial capital. Tonight's events had far exceeded His Majesty the Emperor's expectations. When he found out about it, he was so enraged that he smashed everything he could see. The Jun family's secret power was fully revealed. It was like a demonic, bloodthirsty massacre. In this restless night, they had used blood and lives to shock the entire upper echelons of the imperial capital. It had also ruthlessly stabbed into many people's hearts, causing many of them to be in a state of panic. Everyone was pondering. Faced with such an irresistible power, what should they do? Should they consider the issue of choosing a new side? This was especially true for the 3 princes. Each of them had summoned all of their aides and advisors for an emergency meeting that very night. At this moment, the Jun family's enormous power had caused the eyes of the 3 princes to turn red with envy. If only they could grasp such power in their hands, but in the midst of the discussion, the 3 princes' mansions suddenly caught fire. Following that, countless decapitated heads were thrown into the room, dripping with fresh blood. The 3 princes were scared out of their wits. The guards of the mansions searched wantonly, but not even a trace of the decapitated heads could be found. They were even chased back like ducks by the patrolling military cavalry. However, there were exceptions among the prominent families in the capital, such as the Li family, the Meng family, and the Song family. They had strong foundations, and after the sudden attack by the black-robed men, the experts of their families quickly reacted and stopped the black-robed men from killing them. However, there were still bursts of thick smoke and raging flames that rose up in the Li family's secret chamber. Several people heard the sounds of killing outside. They could not help but want to rush out. One of them was dressed in white robes. He looked to be in his 30s. His face was cold and proud. Looking at his figure and bearing, he was the white-robed Tianxian expert who had killed Qin Hu under Tang Wanli's command. The door opened and the young master of the Li family, Li Yuran, walked in. "Yuran, let me go out. The highest level of these men in black is only Yu Xian's cultivation. It's nothing. Any one of us can go out and stop them. I really don't understand. Your own family has been attacked. Why are you still so slow? Since they want to court death, we'll take care of them." The man in white frowned. He looked angry. He had always been proud and arrogant. Since when did he have to hide in a secret room and not dare to show his face? Chapter 74. So embarrassing. Yesterday, I was told that my internet connection had been cut off, but today, it's still there. No. Absolutely not. Li Yuran was still smiling calmly at this moment. I would rather the entire Li residence be burned to the ground than to act rashly. His smile was strangely gentle, cold, and ruthless. As long as the people are still here, the Li family will still exist. But if the few of you go out, regardless of what happens to the men in black outside, there is one thing that I am certain of. Countless eyes will immediately focus on this place. Once your identities are exposed, or even if it's not exposed, as long as you show yourselves, then the Li family will have a hard time moving forward. Moreover, the rumor that Xian Dan is in the Li family will immediately spread like wildfire. When that time comes, the matter will be over. Senior brother, all of you stay in the secret chamber and do not come out. Once the rumor has died down, I will immediately arrange for you to leave the city. If anything happens in the future, I will seek help from master and senior brother." Li Yuran smiled lightly. "This time, not only will I not stop them, I will also send a few more people for them to kill. I want to see how Senior Duke Jun is going to deal with this. This is an unpardonable crime of rebellion. Even if the courtiers can tolerate it, can the imperial family?" Li Yuran's face revealed a rare sneer. "Fine. Since that is the case, I will not say anything. Do as you wish." The man in white revealed a dissatisfied expression and nodded his head helplessly. "Junior brother, when you have the time, go back and take a look. Master, he is very worried about you. Rest assured, senior brother. I will." Li Yuran smiled faintly and walked out. At this moment, a Chihua rocket suddenly exploded in mid-air, bursting into colorful fireworks. It was extremely beautiful. As the fireworks blossomed, all the men in black suddenly retreated. Like a receding tide, they quickly left the battlefield. In the blink of an eye, they jumped over the wall and ran out of the main gate. In a flash, they had already disappeared into the boundless night. Then, the thunderous sound of horse hooves rang out. Thousands of cavalrymen converged into a torrent. Their formation was neat and tidy, and they rushed over with an extremely murderous air. In the blink of an eye, they had gathered at the entrance of Grand Preceptor Li's residence. A series of commands rang out, and the cavalrymen split into two groups in an orderly manner. In an instant, they had surrounded the Li family's residence so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The door was slammed open with a bang and Jun Tian walked in with large strides, his entire body brimming with killing intent. A sky-blue light flickered around his body. It was obvious that he had already activated his own Tian Xian Qi. Although the Li family would not dare to touch him with his status, he still had to take precautions. It was better to be safe than sorry. On both sides, 2 groups of elite soldiers split into 2 rows and entered in a single file, their swords flashing. All members of the Li family, come out for this duke. An assassin has appeared in the capital. Search the entire city. Grandpa Jun bellowed, his voice reverberating for miles. Ha ha ha, it turns out that Brother Jun has personally come. Your presence brings light to my humble dwelling. Grand Preceptor Li Shang's face was filled with a cordial smile as he walked out from the main hall to welcome Jun Tian. His steps were quick, as if he was a pair of twins who had been separated for many years during the chaos of war. Jun Tian's face was stern as he said, Grand Preceptor Li, please discipline your family's servants and relatives. Her Royal Highness Princess Raimu was assassinated today. This Jun has a duty to apprehend the disobedient assassin. If there are any accidental injuries, I will not be held responsible. After saying that, he waved his hand. Search! Wait! Li Shang's white beard fluttered as he took a step forward. His gentle and cordial expression suddenly changed. His beard and hair fluttered as he said in a loud voice, Senior Duke Jun, although you are the Commander-in-Chief of the Imperial Army and a Duke of the Empire, this Grand Preceptor is also a first-grade Imperial officer and a Duke of the Empire. Without the Emperor's personal decree, who would dare to act presumptuously in my Li family's residence? Jun Tian sneered. There was a faint trace of hysteria in his eyes as he slowly said, Grand Preceptor, are you implying that a first-grade official in the imperial court has the right to harbor assassins? Search for him. Anyone who obstructs the search will be killed on the spot. Suddenly, the hundreds of soldiers behind him swarmed in and rushed into the Li family's residences to search. Li Shang was so angry that his entire body trembled. He roared, Jun Tian, you are acting so unscrupulously and overstepping your authority. Do you really want to rebel? Jun Tian laughed loudly. Grand Preceptor's words are truly strange. This Duke's mission is only to search for the assassin who assassinated Her Royal Highness the Princess. How did I overstep my authority? How unscrupulous! How can I rebel? Grand Preceptor has repeatedly obstructed this Duke's search. Could it be that this has something to do with the assassin? Jun Tian ignored him and waved his hand for the soldiers to hurry up and search. At that moment, a young man dressed in white stood out with a smile. It was none other than the eldest young master, Li Yuran. He respectfully bowed to Jun Tian and said, If Senior Duke Jun were to search by imperial decree, the Li family would naturally not dare to disobey. However, without the Emperor's imperial decree, Senior Duke Jun barged into the residence of a first-grade imperial officer and wantonly conducted a search. Even if Senior Duke Jun is not afraid of crooked shadows, our Li family still needs to maintain some face. If word of this were to spread, it would not look good on anyone, right? Jun Tian coldly looked at the refined young man before him. He could not help but think of his own grandson, Mo Xie. His grandson could have been stronger than Li Yuran, but ended up suffering from such a treacherous plot. Thinking of this, Lengling's rage flared up and she asked, What do you want? This junior would like to ask Senior Duke Jun a very simple question. Senior Duke Jun has repeatedly said that he is searching for the assassin in our residence. However, regardless of where Senior Duke got the information that my Li family is harboring the assassin, if we are unable to find the assassin in our Li family, what will Senior Duke do? Li Yuran smiled warmly and took a step forward. If that is the case, will Senior Duke Jun give my Li family an explanation? Grandpa Jun laughed loudly. Suddenly, he took a step forward and fiercely slapped Li Yuran's face. A crisp paw sound rang out. Then, he kicked Li Yuran's abdomen, causing him to fall to the ground. Then, Jun Tian angrily shouted, When this old man is searching for the assassin, even your grandfather Li Shang does not dare to fart in front of this old man. Who do you think you are? You dare to come out here and point your fingers? You want an explanation from this old man? This is an explanation. He spat out a mouthful of spittle. What a joke. If you are unable to find the assassin, then it naturally means that your Li family is innocent. If you are unable to find the assassin, then you will have to continue searching. What else can you do? I would like to ask your Li family. Every single one of you, from the old to the young, are desperately trying to stop this old man from capturing the assassin. What is the meaning of this? Could it be that your Li family wishes to rebel and is the mastermind behind this plot to assassinate the princess? If the assassin who tried to assassinate the princess were to escape while you are trying to stall for time, how many heads does your Li family have to bear this crime? These words were directed at Li Shang. It was obvious that the Li Yuran before him did not even have the qualifications to speak to him as an equal. Even if two armies were to face off against each other, there was still a need to consider the difference in status. If one did not have the qualifications, then they would only be courting death. It was not that Li Yuran did not understand this point. However, seeing her grandfather being humiliated in front of her own eyes, coupled with the fact that there were several people in the secret chamber who could not see the light of day, if they were to be discovered, it would be akin to having mud fall into one's pants. Even if it was not shit, it would still be shit. She could only brace herself and come out, hoping that Jun Zhantian would be able to rely on his demeanor as the #1 person in the military to block this matter. Who would have thought that Jun Zhantian would not only throw away his demeanor, but also his face? One slap and one kick, both quick and ruthless. Although Li Yuran was a genius in martial arts, she was limited by her age. At present, she was only at the initial level of the Gold Xian realm. The gap between her and Grandpa Jun's Tianxian was like that of the heavens and the earth. In addition, she was caught off guard and received a solid slap and a kick. She felt as if her head was going to explode and she was seeing stars. Although Grandpa Jun did not utilize his Xian Qi, Li Yuran's slap under the watchful eyes of nearly 1,000 people felt as if it had struck his heart. His fingers lightly tapped on a small jade tea table beside him. His eyebrows gradually knitted together like two azure dragons. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. Li Shang's eldest grandson, Li Yuran, is indeed a talent, but a very dangerous talent. Jun Zhantian's soldiers searched along the way, overturning all the chests and cabinets. Crashing sounds could be heard everywhere. It seemed that these people were not here to search for the assassins, but purely to cause destruction. Bang! A huge vase was thrown out and smashed into pieces. Grand Preceptor Li Shang's face twitched fiercely. That was the only one in the world. Bang! Bang! Grandpa Jun's face was cold as he watched with his horsewhip in hand. Panting heavily, he shouted, "Search ruthlessly for me." Even though it was such a serious moment, everyone behind him turned their heads and snickered. Search, can the adjective ruthlessly be used to describe it? Jun Zhantian's choice of words was clearly not professional. It was more accurate to say smash. Ruthlessly smash. This old man is quite interesting. He's afraid that others won't know that he's deliberately causing trouble. Might as well watch for a while longer. The person in the palanquin could not help but smile. Following the words ruthlessly, the soldiers searched even more forcefully. Nearly 2,000 soldiers rushed into the Li family's residence. It was as if they were attacking an enemy's city during a war. Some fell and some were smashed. The people of the Li family gathered in the courtyard and watched, their hearts bleeding. That was all money. After watching for a while, the person in the palanquin closed his eyes and said in a low voice, "There shouldn't be any major problems. Let's go back." He then lowered the curtain and leaned back on the soft seat, closing his eyes to rest. That old man Jun Zhantian had clearly understood his intentions. He only smashed and smashed in conspicuous places, but did not touch any of the Li family's secret areas. It seems that nothing major will happen here. I want to see, after such a ruckus, which aristocratic family in the capital will still dare to casually pick a side? The person in the palanquin smiled. Fighting must be controlled within a small area. If it endangers the country, then today will be a warning. The palanquin rose and left without a sound. Jun Tian remained motionless. Jun Wui, on the other hand, looked back indifferently after the palanquin left. Reporting to the marshal, there is no trace of the assassin. One soldier after another came to report. Following that, reports came from all directions. None of them had found anything. Jun Tian became furious and shouted, "Could it be that the assassin flew into the sky? Is he not in the Li family? Let's go take a look elsewhere." He turned around and led the soldiers out. Then, he mounted his horse and galloped in the direction of the Meng family's residence. The Li family members looked at the courtyard that looked like a beggar's nest. They wanted to cry but had no tears. The imperial examiner Li Shang patted his waist and sat up with difficulty. Li Yuran hurriedly went forward to support him. The grandfather and grandson looked at each other and saw the anger in each other's eyes. They also saw a little bit of luck. "Grandfather, anyone with a discerning eye would be able to tell that those men in black were Jun Tian's subordinates. Jun Tian is a thief crying 'Stop thief!' and imposing a groundless crime. This is no different from rebellion. Since we didn't manage to find the assassin, Grandpa can bring all the officials and report him to the court tomorrow." Li Yuran pondered and said, "Jun Tian has clearly shown signs of going crazy." He mobilized his troops and broke into the houses of the court officials to search for them. If the Li family's wealth is exchanged for the fall of the Jun family, grandfather, this is still a good deal. On the other hand, if grandfather doesn't make any moves, I'm afraid that we will be suspected of having a guilty conscience." Li Shang frowned and sighed deeply. He then said in a heavy tone, "Yuran, you are talented and intelligent. You are able to foresee the enemy's schemes. You can be called the #1 person in the younger generation. However, you still have some shortcomings. For example, politics. You're still a little too young, and your foresight is also a little lacking." "Politics?" Li Yuran was somewhat puzzled. Jun Tian's crime is not enough for His Majesty to punish the Jun family? Enough? Not enough. Far from enough. Li Shang's white eyebrows trembled. The anger and helplessness that he had displayed in front of Jun Tian had disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by endless scheming. It was obvious that his previous cowardice had been feigned. "You still don't understand the importance of Jun Tian in His Majesty's heart. I'll simply tell you that His Majesty's life has been saved at least 6 times by this old man. If Jun Tian had any intention of rebelling, or had even the slightest bit of ambition, he would have already ascended to the throne. It is true that the Tian family has no relatives, but they will never truly put those who are absolutely loyal to them to death. This is the fundamental reason why the Jun family has been able to suppress the 3 armies even though they have no successors. Do you really think that you can topple Jun Tian based on what you've just done?" Li Shang laughed mischievously. "Do you really think that Jun Tian is so brainless that he would offend our Li family? Moreover, do you really think that Jun Tian's actions have offended us to the point of no return?" Li Yuran was very intelligent. She instantly understood a lot. Her complexion changed as she said, "Don't tell me, well, inform our brothers and sisters that we will update them from tomorrow onwards. We will update them at 9 o'clock in the morning and 18 o'clock in the evening. If there are 3 updates, we will update them at noon. There will be an explanation at that time. To be honest, I have been updating at midnight every day in order to rush up the rankings. My schedule has been completely messed up, and I have been very tired. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for your support during this time. It is finally going to be published. It will be pushed out next week. The The explosion that everyone is looking forward to will begin on the 1st of May. Feng Ling will fight side by side with everyone until the end of this book. Thank you. Chapter 76. Li Shang smiled sinisterly. Humph, if it wasn't for His Majesty's instructions, the Li family would have been littered with corpses. Not a single person would have survived. Jun Zhantian's original plan should have been like this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have mobilized the army with such great fanfare. But there must have been a reason for him to change his mind. In the entire Tianxiang kingdom, there is only one person who can make Jun Zhantian give up on this idea, and that is His Majesty the Emperor. Oh yes, there is another person, and that is that debauchee Jun Moxie. You just told me that there is a 90% chance that the debauchee is already dead, but I'm afraid that may not be the case. If Jun Moxie is really dead, even with His Majesty's interference, Old Man Jun may not be willing to let the matter rest. Therefore, Jun Moxie's life should not be in any danger, and this news should have just been received by Old Man Jun, so today, even old Jun Zhantian is helpless. In this matter, we seem to be innocent and unlucky, but I believe that there are people more unfortunate than us. Li Shang smiled. Her Royal Highness was assassinated, and this matter has stung His Majesty's heart, so Jun Zhantian has gone mad. His Majesty is using this opportunity to reshuffle the three princes. All the families and officials who have been close to any one of the three princes will definitely be warned, banished, and punished tonight. As for those in the imperial palace, I'm afraid they have already been dealt with. It's a pity that our preparations have been wasted. Jun Zhantian's madness this time was unexpected, but it was inevitable. If we had controlled Jun Moxie, that old man would have already gone mad. And His Majesty is taking advantage of this madness. And then, His Majesty will use this opportunity to weaken the Jun family's military power, and then suppress the other families. The one behind old Jun is the Emperor, and the one who is truly brilliant is the Emperor. Do you think he can topple old Jun? Li Yuran was somewhat shocked. He had never imagined that these political veterans would think so far ahead. In fact, they had even tried to figure out each other's thoughts. This was especially true for the person who stood at the highest position in the Tianxiang Empire. His Majesty is a man of great talent and strategy. Naturally, he doesn't want his successor to be an incompetent person. So, he wants the three princes to compete for the top position, but he doesn't want things to get out of hand. So, if things go too far, he will get rid of all of them and start over again. Therefore, although the three princes often fought openly and secretly, the real big families in the capital would never rashly get involved. This is the biggest reason. Remember, let bygones be bygones. Before the situation is absolutely clear, don't take sides. Look at tonight. Li Shang pointed at the black smoke floating everywhere in the sky. All those who stood in line in advance are now in the sky. If that's the case, are we just going to forget about what happened today? Li Yuran asked. How can I just let it go like this? Even if our Li family is willing, His Majesty will not. Li Shang slyly smiled. So, we will definitely report to the Emperor tomorrow. That way, His Majesty will have a reason to suppress all the big families and achieve his ultimate goal. If we don't cooperate, it will be very difficult for us in the future. Li Yuran fell into deep thought. He had been smart since he was a child, and was always able to draw inferences about other things. Whether it was civil or military, he was a genius among geniuses. But now that he heard these words, he realized that he was still young after all. In the end, he still lacked political awareness and foresight. Gently stroking the spot on his face where Jun Zhantian had slapped him, Li Yuran's eyes turned as cold as a viper's. Jun Zhantian, I will never forget this slap of yours in my life. The same chaos was happening in the Meng family. The Meng family was tossed around even more thoroughly than the Li family. Jun Tian had practically destroyed their house. But even so, Jun Tian was still very depressed. Because this wasn't his original plan at all, and it wasn't the result he wanted the most. After this incident, the capital would be peaceful for a long time, at least on the surface. I wonder how Xie is doing right now? Is there any hope of recovery? This is really worrying. Jun Tian let out a long sigh. Mounting his horse, he glanced at the crying Meng family members behind him and urged his horse forward. His complexion was not much better than the Meng family members. Since His Majesty said that Xie is not dead, then this old man will help His Majesty again. It is worth it. But this matter is a bit anticlimactic. This old man's original intention was to kill all these people. Even though I have killed more than half of them, I have not been able to kill the one I wanted to kill the most. At this moment, an anxious voice suddenly rang out. Jun Tian, you old man! That's enough. Jun Tian's body trembled, as if he could not believe his ears. He slowly turned around and his eyes widened. His face suddenly revealed an expression of ecstasy. A skinny and withered old man flew in front of him, carrying a person in his arms. The old man was panting and sweating profusely, but Jun Tian did not care about him. He floated down from his horse and took the person from the old man's arms. With a trembling voice, he said, Xie? These two came back at the right time. Just when the curtains were about to fall, they came back just in time. Jun Xie looked at the old man in front of him, who was suddenly overjoyed. It was obvious that he had just walked out of despair. The old man hugged him as if he was hugging the world's most precious treasure. The deep wrinkles on his face contained deep concern. The ecstasy of regaining something that was lost caused his fingers to tremble. His old eyes were red with excitement. Jun Xie's heart trembled violently. This was a man who commanded millions of troops, a tough man who had returned from hundreds of battles on the bloody battlefield. The moment he saw that his grandson was still alive, he was suddenly overjoyed. It made him look like a frail old man in his twilight years. That deep affection and kinship. At this moment, Jun Xie actually felt a sour feeling from the bottom of his heart. This feeling was very warm, very comfortable, and there was also a feeling of his nose turning sour. Jun Xie suddenly felt that his throat was a little blocked and his nostrils seemed to be unable to breathe. He had a feeling of wanting to cry. Was this the kinship that he had dreamed of? In both past and present lives, who had cared about him so much? In both past and present lives, who could mobilize an entire country's army for him? In both past and present lives, who had been so desperate for him? Who had been in such despair for him? Who had been so overjoyed for him? Who had been so disregarded his reputation, his life, his family for him? Looking at the old man in front of him, Jun Xie did not doubt that this old man could completely pierce a hole in the sky for him. Because he was his only hope. His only hope. Grandpa! Jun Xie's nose turned sour and these two words blurted out. Ever since he came to this world, this was the first time he was willing to call out this form of address from the bottom of his heart. In both his past and present lives, this was the first time. Yes, this is my grandpa. Not only Jun Moxie's grandpa, but also my grandpa. He is my grandpa, Jun Xie's grandpa. At the side, Jun Wui's crippled body floated down from the horse and sat on the cold ground. Looking at Jun Xie, his eyes were full of gratification and surprise. And satisfaction. In his pair of tiger-like eyes, there were crystal-clear tears, but he secretly turned his head and let them fall. Then, he turned back and smiled gently. This is my family. Should I still resist? No. At this moment, Jun Xie suddenly accepted this body and this family. He accepted this world. Whether it was his mind or his heart. For this old man in front of him, for this family. From now on, I am Jun Xie. I am a member of the Jun family. Tianxiang country, Tianxiang city, Jun family. This is my family. Grandpa June was so moved that tears almost flowed down his face. Although his grandson looked like he was on his last breath, he was still alive. Moreover, his injuries did not seem as serious as the rumors said. God bless me. As long as he is not dead. As long as he is not dead, everything is fine. The joy of regaining what he had lost caused the old man's eyes to become moist. His body trembled slightly, on the verge of collapsing. This night had been torturous. Starting from tomorrow, we will update from 9 to 6. Update until further notice. Try not to update in the wee hours or in the middle of the night. Everyone should get a good night's sleep and keep their bodies strong, haha. Chapter 77. In the imperial court the next day, the disputes between the various parties were even more intense than the farmers' market. After the customary greetings to His Majesty, there was a moment of silence, as if waiting for the rain to come. This was not surprising. Before the storm, there would always be a suffocating silence. His Majesty, the Emperor, looked at the dozens of empty seats and the tall pile of memorials to impeach Jun Tian. He could not help but feel somewhat startled. Although this was within his expectations, it was still very unexpected. Isn't this too much? Although he had received the news last night and was furious, it was only a few names on a piece of paper. Looking at it now, almost half of the imperial court was empty. This feeling was too direct. For example, let's say a student is in a class with 100 students. At night, when he heard that 30 students had dropped out or transferred schools, he would not feel anything. But the next day, when he was faced with an empty classroom, this ratio was not much different from the current imperial court of Tianxiang. Last night, with the assassination of the princess and Grandpa June as the starting point, Tianxiang City was filled with flames of war and murderous intent. More than 10 high-ranking officials of the imperial court were beheaded. Among these people, there were many who claimed to be enemies with the June family. Apart from this characteristic, there was another common point. These people had already sided with one of the 3 princes. However, everyone was well aware of this common point, so they would not say it out loud. Speaking nonsense at this critical juncture was no different from courting death. Among those who were killed last night, there were a total of 12 people who were qualified to stand here. Unbiased, they belonged to the 3 princes' camps, with 4 people from each faction. Among them, there was an assistant minister from the Ministry of Justice, 2 assistant ministers from the Ministry of Personnel, 1 deacon, 3 officials from the Ministry of Rights, 1 official from the Ministry of Revenue, 3 imperial censors, and 2 grand scholars. And these were only those who could be seen in front of them. How many more could not be seen? The death of all these people at once could be said to be a great shock to the imperial court. It could even be said to be in danger of shaking the foundation of the country. However, all of this was under the operation of a certain expert. Although this expert was currently so angry that his eyes were blue, there were also some ministers who had good eyesight, good memories, and were well informed. They noticed, intentionally or unintentionally, that there seemed to be quite a number of unfamiliar faces in the palace this time. Most of the familiar or even very familiar faces had disappeared, such as the leader of the armed guards, Murong Qianjun. It could be said that he had been promoted 3 times in a day, and the speed at which he rose through the ranks was extremely rare. However, this extremely rare, rising star of the Murong clan had now disappeared. It seemed that the blood in the palace was no less than the outside world. Many people began to feel uneasy. What happened last night? Why are there so many people missing today? Who can tell me? His Majesty was an expert in the Politburo. He closed his eyes and glared at Jun Tian, who was resting with his eyes closed. Old Master Jun was very tired last night. It could be seen from his face. Otherwise, how could he be like this in the imperial court? He was just short of snoring. His Majesty's words, which clearly showed that he was ignorant, opened the curtains to the attack in the imperial court. Suddenly, a large number of people knelt down in the main hall. "Your Majesty, you must uphold justice for us." A large group of ministers had tears in their eyes. They kowtowed as if they were pounding garlic. "Ministers, if you have something to say, please speak in detail." The Emperor frowned, a puzzled look on his face. As soon as these words came out, dozens of ministers immediately opened fire at Old Master Jun Tian. Some accused him of disregarding the military laws of the empire and mobilizing the troops for his own selfish reasons. Some accused him of disregarding the laws of the empire and disregarding the dignity of the royal family. Some accused him of breaking into the residences of the ministers and allowing his subordinates to smash things. Some even accused him of being lawless and guilty of the most heinous crimes. Some even accused him of having an army to protect himself and planning to rebel. In short, there were a whole series of accusations. There were at least 30 to 40 accusations, and all of them were irrefutable and true. Later on, some even suggested that Jun Tian should be removed from his position and investigated. He should be executed by 1,000 cut. His entire family should be beheaded and his 9 generations should be exterminated. Everyone's faces were flushed red with indignation. In the end, it reached a point where, without killing Jun Tian, we will not be able to cleanse the Emperor's side. Without killing Jun Tian, we will not be able to appease the people's anger. Jun Tian stood with his head raised. His eyes were slightly closed as he looked at the performance of the ministers. He was worried about his grandson's injuries. He was thinking about how to ask the Emperor to bring the best imperial physicians home. Jun Tian. "Old man, what else do you have to say for yourself?" His Majesty the Emperor's voice was very strict. It seemed as if he was about to explode in anger. "Your Majesty, please allow me to report. Yesterday, this old official heard that the princess was assassinated on the main road outside the imperial palace. Although the princess was blessed with great fortune and did not suffer any injuries, the assassins were so deranged and desecrated the imperial family's dignity. This old official was truly furious. I also heard that the assassins may have made a follow-up move. Moreover, they may have targeted the members of the imperial family and the imperial court. This old official was afraid that any delay would result in a disaster. Therefore, I did not have the time to report to Your Majesty. This old official has indeed made a rash mistake. Your Majesty, please investigate this matter and punish me." The Emperor's mouth twitched. He forcefully endured it. "Old man, you've already said it so clearly. How am I supposed to investigate this matter? You make yourself sound so righteous. If I were to punish you, wouldn't I be an incapable emperor? How do you expect me to continue?" "Continue." His Majesty the Emperor frowned, seemingly displeased. "If I don't continue, I really don't know how to continue." Yes. This old official was worried about this matter. "Without reporting to Your Majesty, I woke up in the middle of the night. I did not even have time to change my attire before rushing to the drill grounds. Although I was able to mobilize the troops quickly, the assassins came prepared. In an instant, the city was thrown into chaos. This old official bravely took the lead and charged forward. Bathed in blood, I fought bravely against the countless assassins. Finally, I managed to contain the disaster and even killed all the assassins. The assassins numbered in the hundreds. Their corpses were hung on the city gates for public display. However, this old official did not dare to claim credit for it. Although this old official did everything he could, there were still dozens of officials who were killed by the assassins before they could wait for this old official's rescue. This was all because this old official's actions were too slow, resulting in such a tragedy. This old official is willing to accept this crime of negligence. Grandpa Jun let out a long sigh. His voice was filled with sorrow. Those were the pillars of our Tianxiang kingdom. Rubbing his eyes, he appeared to be sighing. However, He was actually feeling sleepy. Hearing Grandpa June's words, all the ministers in the hall looked at each other in dismay. What? Accept the crime of negligence? Accept your mother's head? Look at what you're saying. You are the great minister who saved the entire Tianxiang kingdom. You acted decisively and turned the tide. You were the pillar that held up the country. Moreover, you protected the dignity of the imperial family's most loyal minister. If I don't reward you fiercely, you will feel that you have suffered a loss. You still want to accept the crime? Besides, who here doesn't know that those men in black yesterday were from your June family? Assassins? What a joke! What do you mean by inverting black and white? What do you mean by confusing right and wrong? That's it. I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen such a shameless person. To think that killing people is like catching thieves. To think that confiscating property is an achievement. This is simply an otherworldly realm. To look up to a great mountain. As for the group of unjustly dead people that were hung on the city gates for public display, if the head of the Ministry of Justice's prison were to identify them, he would definitely find that all of them looked very familiar. They were all prisoners on death row. However, they had been executed by you, Marshal June, in advance. When I went out for breakfast this morning, a tragic incident occurred. A young lady saw me on the street. She was riding her bicycle when she suddenly fell down. This made me feel very apologetic. I was too handsome. The young lady was entranced just looking at me. In the future, I will try my best not to go on the street. I will write this as proof. Chapter 78. The ministers looked at him with disdain and prepared to launch another attack. Grandpa June's self-justifying argument was simply not something that could be refuted. Grandpa June was still a military general after all. The amount of knowledge in his stomach was limited. To be able to come up with a self-justifying argument was already difficult enough. To think that he would be able to come up with a flawless excuse was simply a pipe dream. Unexpectedly, an old man with white hair and beard took a heavy step forward. This old man was tall and sturdy. Standing together with June Tian, they resembled two majestic mountains. His cheeks were bursting out like a leopard's beard. His face was ferocious and his body was filled with savagery. This was Old Man Dugu, second only to June Tian in the military. The capital's #1 crocodile, Dugu Zhongheng. Tianxiang Kingdom's #1 barbarian. #1 ruffian. #1 troublemaker. #1 family's leader. He was thick-skinned enough to be called a grandmaster. He treated ignorance as knowledge and used a broadsword to reason. All the civil and military officials in the imperial court were afraid of him. Even the current emperor could not do anything to him. When he stepped forward, everyone could not help but mutter in their hearts, "Didn't he not attend court for several years? Why is he here today?" Picking such a sensitive period, this old man actually appeared here. It was a little unusual. Dugu Zhongheng's round eyes widened like a bear in the forest. He cupped his fists and spoke in a rough voice, "Your Majesty, the princess and all the court officials were assassinated. This is indeed a major event that shakes the stability of the country. Thanks to Old Man June Tian's prompt decision, this calamity was averted. This old man believes that Old Man June's actions were not wrong. Not only was he not at fault, he was also meritorious. A great meritorious deed." A skinny old man with a goatee sneered, "Such a traitor who brought disaster to the country and the people, causing chaos in the court. If this is considered meritorious, then wouldn't the people of the world despise him?" This man with a goatee was the third most important person in the Meng family, Meng Yufang. Last night, his house was the most devastated. Not even half a roof tile could be found intact. As a high-ranking official of the imperial court, he brought his family to spend the night in the luxurious and prosperous capital. He was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. Now that he saw the two military bigwigs distorting the truth in front of everyone, he couldn't take it anymore and jumped out. Dugu Zongheng was furious. He turned around and fiercely glared at Meng Yufang. He opened his mouth wide, exposing his yellow front teeth. His voice shook the roof tiles. F***ck your grandmother? You sour dog shit. Are you saying that I'm wrong? Huh. As soon as he got angry, his hair and beard stood up even straighter. He opened his mouth wide, as if he wanted to swallow this thin and withered goatee in one gulp. He looked extremely ferocious. Next to him, General Dugu Wudi immediately jumped out and shouted, Meng Yufang, what do you mean by this? My father is talking to His Majesty. How can an old brat like you interrupt? He stretched out his large hand, wanting to grab his neck and lift him up. All the bigwigs raised their eyebrows. This pair of father and son is really unrivaled. They're actually playing hoodlums in the Golden Palace Hall. His Majesty the Emperor was the instigator of this show. He couldn't help but be dumbfounded at this moment. Enough! His Majesty the Emperor shouted angrily and stood up in a violent rage. A bunch of civil and military officials are using filthy language in the Golden Palace Hall. Moreover, they're even fighting. Are they shrews cursing the streets? The Emperor's anger immediately silenced everyone. Apart from the Jun family, Dugu family, Li family, Meng family, Song family, Tang family, and Murong family, everyone else, regardless of their rank, immediately knelt down and said in unison, We have sinned. We are willing to receive punishment from your Majesty. Jun Zhantian's original intention was to capture the assassins. However, he handled the matter improperly and indeed caused chaos in the capital. He will be fined 1 year's salary and will be ordered to spend 3 months in seclusion. However, because of his meritorious service in capturing and killing the assassins, he will be rewarded with 1,000 taels of gold and 1,000-year-old ginseng. Dugu Zongheng will temporarily be in charge of the military affairs. In addition, your families did not distinguish between right and wrong and only cared about your own losses. You'll all be demoted by 1 rank. In order to avoid chaos, your family's military authority will be returned to the military for a year. After a year, you'll be punished. 1 year's salary forfeited, half a month in seclusion, and 1,000 taels of gold and 1,000-year-old ginseng. For Grandpa Jun, could this still be considered a punishment? This was simply a public reward and a public holiday. Only the sentence Dugu Zongheng will temporarily be in charge of the military affairs seemed to have some other meaning. However, it was also very unreliable. All the ministers stole glances at the father and son duo of the Dugu family. Everyone thought, if this is the case, then it would be better to let that old man Jun Zhantian continue to be in charge. This father and son duo of the Dugu family are much more unreasonable than Jun Zhantian. At the very least, Grandpa Jun is quite reasonable in normal times. However, this father and son duo of the Dugu family have never been reasonable. How could their family's private army fall into the hands of this father and son duo? How many will come back? For a moment, almost everyone was cursing Meng Yufang in their hearts. Dugu Zongheng was the mastermind behind His Majesty's actions, yet you still interfered. If this isn't overestimating your own capabilities, then what is it? It's fine if you're the unlucky one, but you're dragging us down with you. Who the hell are you? Almost everyone had a dazed expression on their faces. Regardless of whether it was an act or not, at least on the surface, everyone looked very real. Standing in the imperial court, if one didn't have a few tricks up their sleeves, it would be very difficult for them to stay in the imperial court for long. Only a dozen or so people still had their heads lowered in anger. Those who felt wronged were truly angry and unwilling. However, these people were immediately remembered by all the big shots. People who can't even understand this little bit of limelight are destined to be useless. When they return, they must teach their own sons and nephews to keep their distance from these people. Otherwise, who knows when they will be dragged into the water? Your Majesty and the others are the pillars of the country. To actually act like this in the Golden Hall. We are very disappointed. Incomparably disappointed. His Majesty the Emperor was very angry, unable to restrain his anger. After a series of announcements, he said in a heavy tone, "This matter is decided. There is no need for anyone to say anything." Court dismissed. The Minister of Rites, Sun Chinghe, hastily shouted, "Your Majesty, please stay." This person was Fatty Tang's father-in-law. All the old people looked at him with disdain. Didn't you see that His Majesty was in a hurry to return to the palace to experience the pleasure he had just experienced? To be able to benefit from both sides, to rule over the world, to play with people, to control them, to suppress all the families in the capital, and to bring peace to the entire capital. What a pleasure it was! Why did you choose to delay His Majesty at this juncture? Have you thought it through? You're really stupid. What else do you want? His Majesty the Emperor was obviously very angry. He was pretending to be angry at first, but once he was delayed, the fake also had the tendency to evolve into the real one. Your Majesty, according to our court's tradition, today is the annual Golden Autumn Festival. So regarding the matter of the Golden Scholar Banquet, should it be? This Minister of Rites was obviously lacking a brain. It was not easy to be stupid. All the officials in the imperial court sighed inwardly. What kind of situation was this? Every family was mourning. Who was in the mood to care about the Golden Scholar Banquet? You brat, you're basically stupid's grandfather, old fool. You have to be careful in the future. Don't get along with this idiot. Maybe you'll fall into his hands one day. As expected, His Majesty flew into a rage. He said in a heavy tone, "Golden Scholar Banquet? We are in troubled times right now. What Golden Scholar Banquet? If my memory serves me right, the two ministers that I personally appointed to be in charge of the Scholarly Scholar Autumn Banquet are already on the list of those who were killed by the assassins." After saying this, he used his finger to heavily point at the list on the table in front of him. Then, he swung his sleeves and left with a face full of rage. No one saw that after His Majesty turned around, he grinned. It seemed that he was very happy indeed, no one saw it. But the old officials were secretly happy. As expected, they didn't get out of their own scheme. After His Majesty the Emperor left, all the people who were kneeling on the ground patted their knees and stood up. The few big shots exchanged glances with each other. Everyone had a look of, as expected, in their eyes. Li Shang snorted and glanced at Jun Tian. He put on a fake smile and said, "Congratulations, Lao Jun. Is your grandson well?" Li Shang had deliberately brought up Jun Tian's sad matter. Even if he couldn't topple Jun Tian this time, he could still make this old man angry. At the very least, he could make him feel disgusted. However, Jun Tian was immediately alerted by Li Shang's words. He didn't have the time to pay attention to Li Shang. Instead, he spread his feet and rushed in the direction that His Majesty had left. Your Majesty, I need to borrow that Imperial Physician Immortal. It's urgent." All the big shots staggered. "It's hard to understand. There's really such a thing. I'm speaking the truth. Why are you all attacking me? Could it be that you're jealous of my good looks? But this is also pardonable. Wahaha. Being handsome is like this." Chapter 79. Dugu Zongheng squinted his eyes in disdain. Look at this old man. His grandson is just injured, yet he's so nervous. He doesn't have the demeanor of a great general. I despise him for being ranked below such a commoner. Dugu Wudi grinned and nodded his head like a chicken pecking at rice. Yes, I despise him to the extreme. Heaven and earth mourn. All the ministers shook their heads in disdain. You Dugu family members would shout to the heavens even if you lost a piece of skin. Yet, you're here to despise Jun Jantian. You're truly shameless. However, Dugu Zongheng's words were very convincing. I reckon that he was the one who helped him think it through, eh? Did he think it through for a long time? This was a shocking piece of news. Could it be that the military is at odds with each other? Thinking of this, all the old foxes muttered in their hearts. Dugu Zongheng was very happy to see his son cooperate with him. Stroking his beard, he said, "My family is still the best. Each family has more than 10 people, and each one is full of vigor. Unlike the Jun family, which only has 1 person." Dugu Wudi nodded his head like a chicken pecking at rice. That's right. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines. Just 1 sentence and you've revealed it again? Each family has more than 10 people? Do you think that your wife is a sow? Truly unbearably vulgar. Besides, your 3 sons have nearly 20 wives. You only have 10 grandchildren, and you still have the nerve to brag. Ignoring the father and son who were boasting and praising each other, they shook their heads and walked out to go home. Let's just treat the events of the past 2 days as a wonderful farce. If only I knew it would be like this. Sigh. Not long after, the palace guards saw Grandpa Jun proudly leading an old man with white hair and beard out of the palace with a medicine box in his hand. Jun Jantian was riding a horse. Surprisingly, he had a sedan chair with him. It seems that Grandpa Jun had even prepared a palanquin for the imperial physician before entering the palace. This was truly a meticulous and thorough plan. What is called an expert? This is called an expert. Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao lay on the bed, trying their best to look like they were dying, but in fact they were already enjoying themselves. The little lowly Ku-er carefully served him, scooping spoonful after spoonful of crystal sugar bird's nest porridge, ginseng lotus seed soup, 8 treasure hibiscus soup. In short, it was a very nutritious food that could be eaten. He ate them all with gusto. The only thing that made him unhappy was that the old man had also brought over a lot of 6th-level mystical beast blood. It was said that this was also a rare nutritious food. However, Jun Moxie would pinch his nose and gulp it down every time, or pour it into the bucket beside the bed when he had the time. It tasted terrible. I'm not a barbarian. Is there a need for you to feed me raw blood? How unhygienic is that? Aren't you afraid of having a stomachache? Of course, this was not the only thing that made him feel good. The key was that after this injury, Jun Moxie discovered that the Hongjun Pagoda in his mind was constantly rotating at a high speed. The white fog of spiritual energy coming out from it was becoming denser and denser, scouring the meridians in his body over and over again. Especially the injured areas, they became the focus of attention. In less than a day and a night, the sword wound in his body had already healed up. With a few coughs, he coughed out a few thick black blood clots. The heaviness in his chest had also lessened by a lot. The sword wound on his thigh looked very serious. After all, it was almost transparent. However, under the continuous nourishment of the spiritual energy, he could no longer feel the pain. Only the waves of numbness and itchiness throughout his body made Jun Moxie feel somewhat uncomfortable. However, it was also somewhat comfortable. As the saying goes, pain and happiness. Not only that, because of this injury, the Hongjun Pagoda continued to pour out spiritual energy. It seemed as if it would not stop until the scabs on Jun Moxie's body fell off. Of course, Jun Moxie would not let go of such a good opportunity to cultivate. He straightforwardly activated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune and guided the spiritual energy through his meridians. As soon as he activated the art, he immediately discovered something different. The spiritual energy seemed to condense and collide in his meridians. After the blockage caused by the sword wound a few times, it suddenly cleared up. At a speed that was almost visible to the naked eye, he could feel the airflow in his meridians expanding and becoming thicker bit by bit. If it was in the past, the Hongjun Pagoda would have stopped the output of spiritual energy a long time ago. However, this time, it did not have any intention of stopping. Jun Moxie was naturally happy. He simply gave up on the treatment of the sword wound and focused on guiding the spiritual energy to strengthen the airflow in his meridians. Jun Moxie suddenly felt that his behavior was similar to a scam. The other party was helping him to treat his injury out of goodwill, but he was using this opportunity to improve himself. It was like an unscrupulous businessman using the kindness of people to make huge profits. However, I'd rather do this kind of scam a few more times. I've already become addicted to scamming people. It would be a waste not to scam people, Jun Moxie shouted in his heart. He grasped the speed of the scam even more tightly. Otherwise, what would he do if the spiritual energy fell back to its original state after his injury was healed? He was already used to such a high quality of spiritual energy. If he were to fall back to his original state, all he could do was cry. Was he supposed to kill himself again in exchange for this kind of cultivation environment? It was a pity that the output of spiritual energy would still more or less heal the injured parts. No matter how slow it was still in the process of recovery. When he felt the sword wound on his thigh giving off a numbing sensation, the speed of the spiritual energy in the Hongjun Pagoda finally slowed down. After maintaining this for a while, it finally slowed down and his sea of consciousness returned to a state of silence. Jun Moxie was startled. He finally woke up. He sighed in his heart. It seems that I haven't enjoyed enough. This kind of cultivation speed is really too fascinating. Under his inner vision, he could see a transparent stream of energy slowly flowing through his meridians. Compared to before he was injured, it had actually doubled in this short period of one night. According to the standards of this world's Xian Qi, it was at least a level 8 Xian Qi cultivation. Moreover, it was very pure. In this world where people below level 9 were ants, even the purest 8th level Xian Qi was not worth mentioning in the forest of silver Xian and gold Xian experts. However, one should not think that Jun Moxie's cultivation speed was slow. It had only been 1.5 months since he came to this world. And in this 1.5 months, his original 3rd level Xian Qi had risen to 8th level. This kind of cultivation speed, even those old geezers of the supreme divine Xian realm would be shocked to the point that their old teeth would fall off. If this world had an anatomical research institute, once they found out about Jun Moxie's cultivation speed, it would be strange if they didn't cut him into 8 pieces for research. Jun Moxie heaved a sigh of relief. He suddenly felt that his injury this time was really King worth it. He even pondered if he should cut himself once or twice every once in a while. A guard came in and reported, Young Master Tang is here to see you." Jun Moxie replied with an oath. Then, he seemed to have thought of something. He nonchalantly stuffed a cloth bag beside his pillow into the quilt. Then, he said in a weak voice, "Go and invite young Master Tang in." Following a series of heavy footsteps, Fatty Tang panted as he walked into Jun Moxie's room with difficulty. The large bedroom seemed to have suddenly become narrow. "Third young master, you scared me to death." Tang Yuan's face was full of shock. "I heard that you went to see the late emperor and cried for half the night. Say, if we brothers were to be separated forever, how am I supposed to live?" Jun Moxie looked at Fatty weakly. He really wanted to jump up and kick him. But now that he had to pretend to be seriously injured, he had to let him off for a while. But the look in his eyes was so obvious that he wanted to devour someone. "I've changed. I don't say that I'm handsome anymore, even though I'm really handsome." But in one day and one night, the video was played 300 or 400 times. Isn't this too exaggerated? Chapter 80. Jun Moxie looked at Fatty weakly. He really wanted to jump up and give him a kick. However, he had to pretend to be seriously injured, so he could only spare him for now. However, his gaze was so blatant that he wanted to devour someone. Fortunately, brother, you didn't die. Otherwise, I would be too lonely in the future. Without you, I really don't know what to do. Fatty Tang wiped his sweat and took the cup of tea from Ku-er's hand. He took a sip and then turned his head and shouted, "Come on! Hurry up and bring in the gift from the Tang family for Jun Sunshao." Jun Emosia looked at the door with interest. He really didn't know that this dear friend actually needed to carry his gift. What kind of gift is it? Two men carried two big boxes and came in, huffing and puffing. Suddenly, Jun Moxie's bedroom was completely occupied by Tang Yuan and the two big boxes. Even Ku-er had no place to hide. She had to curl up her legs and squat on the chair. Tang Yuan waved them out. He smiled and opened the wooden boxes mysteriously, as if he was presenting a treasure. He sneakily peeked at Jun Moxie and then moved away. Jun Moxie almost fainted when he saw what was inside. There were boxes after boxes, bottles after bottles, packets after packets. The packaging was exquisite and the smell of medicine assailed his nostrils. One look and one could tell that it was expensive. Jun Moxie was very suspicious. Did this fatty search all the medicine shops in the city? If an ordinary person was injured, these medicines would be very useful and practical. Some of them might not even be bought with money. However, the problem was, Jun Moxie was different from others. He didn't need these things at all. To Jun Moxie, these things were equivalent to a huge pile of rubbish. At the very least, it was of little value. After groaning, Jun Moxie said weakly, "Fatty, it must have been hard on you. The medicine you've brought is enough for me to live until I'm 100 years old, even if I get injured 7 or 8 times a day. You're not here to visit me, you're here to curse me to get injured a few more times." Tang Yuan slammed the wooden chest shut and proudly said, "Third young master, what do you think of my methods? All the medicines in the Tianxiang city, even if they are of the saint grade, are all in this box." Then, he mysteriously moved closer to Jun Emosia's ear and whispered, "Third young master, I've spent a lot of effort to get my hands on the bottom layer. It's a treasure that can only be found by chance, but not by searching for it. You have to hide it carefully." "What?" Jun Moxie was slightly interested. He raised his eyebrows and asked. "Stop. Stop, stop, stop." Jun Moxie felt a headache coming on. What kind of strange and messy things are these? What's 100 caddies? Please spare my life, don't disgust me. Jun Moxie felt a headache coming on. Hurry up and take it away. If Grandpa sees this, don't harm me. What are you afraid of? Any man would like this stuff. I reckon that old Master Jun also has it. Old Master Jun is not young anymore. Without these things, even if he still has his heroic spirit, he may not. Ha ha! Tang Yuan laughed recklessly. Suddenly, "What do you mean I also have it?" A heavy voice rang out. Jun Tian strode to the door and looked at Tang Yuan with a puzzled expression. Then, he looked at the crowded bedroom. "What's going on? What did you say just now? Why is my luck so bad?" Tang Yuan was dumbstruck. Large beads of sweat started to form on his forehead. His eyeballs started to spin around, and his fat body started to soak in a pool of sweat. If the old man had heard what he had said just now, "What is this pile of things?" Grandpa Jun was somewhat angry. "It's a mess. Hurry up and clear it away." Tang Yuan hurriedly stood up and nodded his head like a chicken pecking rice. Yes, I will clear it away immediately. It's just some ordinary medicinal ingredients, nothing special." The moment he spoke, Grandpa Jun immediately reacted. "Fatty, what did you say just now? I also have it?" Tang Yuan's facial features squeezed together in a split second. His complexion turned from white to red, and then from red to green. His chubby cheeks couldn't stop trembling, and his 2 thighs also showed signs of cramping. Fatty was saying that you still have the heroic spirit of His Majesty. He also said that you also have the heroic spirit of His Majesty. However, he felt that it was a taboo and did not dare to say it again. June Moxie quickly tried to smooth things over. Looking at Fatty's pitiful appearance, if Grandpa June were to say another word, he would probably be paralyzed with fear. What is so taboo about that? Is it worth being scared to this extent? This old man still has the heroic spirit of His Majesty. This is the truth. Grandpa June looked at Tang Yuan with disdain and lectured him. In the future, if you have nothing to do, don't always drag our monsieur to those shady places. He has learned bad things from you in the past. Ah! Tang Yuan was stunned. Grandpa, how can you invert right and wrong? It was clearly me who had learned bad things from your grandson. Grandpa June snorted. In the old man's heart, his grandson was naturally good and well-behaved. The reason why he was so disappointing in the past was mainly because he had learned bad things from his bad friends. With a wave of his hand, a few guards came in and carried the 2 boxes out. Tang Yuan became anxious. What about the second box? June Moxie was also sweating profusely. Could it be that the second box was even worse than the first? That would really be the death of me. Grandpa June waved his hand and ordered all the boxes to be sent to June Moxie's small warehouse. Ku'er also followed. Only then did the 2 of them heave a sigh of relief and exhaled at the same time. A white-haired, white-bearded, white-robed old man walked in. He had a kind countenance and a face full of calmness. Tang Yuan was shocked. He stood up respectfully and greeted Mr. Feng. This Mr. Feng was the head of the imperial physicians, Feng Huixing. In Tianxiang City, he had a resounding nickname, Feng Busi. This meant that no matter how serious one's injuries were, as long as imperial physician Feng extended his hand, one would definitely not die. Even though this was an exaggeration, Feng Huixing's medical skills were unquestionable. Even if Hua Tuo and Bien Ke were to come back to life, they would not be able to do much. In the past, Tang Yuan had suffered a serious illness. All the doctors in the capital were helpless. At the critical moment, it was this Feng Huixing who saved his life. Thus, Tang Yuan was very grateful to Feng Huixing. After all, he was his benefactor. Feng Huixing nodded his head and smiled kindly. Without saying anything, he sat by the bed and placed his hand on June Moxie's wrist. At the same time, he carefully observed June Moxie's complexion. He opened his eyelids and even let June Moxie stick out his tongue to take a look. At this moment, a thought suddenly appeared in June Moxie's mind. His internal energy controlled the flow of energy in his body. His meridians moved a few times and his pulse became abnormal. This was a mysterious force that did not belong to this world. Of course, no one would be able to see through it. Feng Huixing's expression gradually turned solemn. He had originally thought that Jun Zhantian was making a mountain out of a molehill when he asked His Majesty for help. But now that he had taken Jun Zhantian's pulse, he suddenly discovered that the condition of this young man's body was unexpectedly terrible. Sweat, I won't say anything else. Everyone, continue reading. Chapter 81. Jun Zhantian noticed the change in his expression and could not help but feel apprehensive. He asked, "Old Feng, how is it?" Feng Huixing looked at Jun Moxie pitifully and shook his head. Sighing, he said, "His life is not in danger. However, the other aspects are very bad." "Very bad?" Grandpa June was shocked. "How bad?" "His meridians are stagnant and showing signs of drying up. His internal organs are damaged. This..." He sighed and raised his head. "Did third young master go through intense physical training? Furthermore, did it exceed the limits of his body?" Jun Zhantian felt that something was wrong. "Yes, there were 7 days before yesterday." "That's it." "That's right." Feng Huixing retracted his hand and furrowed his brows. "There is a limit to a person's strength. Third young master's body was originally weak and deficient. He relied solely on his strong willpower to endure the intense training that his body could not handle. How could his veins and meridians withstand it? He had already sustained internal injuries. If that was all he needed to do was stop the training and recuperate properly. Then, there would be a chance for him to recover. However, at this point in time, his chest and abdomen were struck by an assassin's sword and 2 kicks, causing his internal organs to be injured. Furthermore, his internal organs were damaged by the sword's aura, causing the accumulated internal injuries to be triggered. How could he be lucky enough to have sustained these 2 injuries? That was not all. The most difficult part was that after he was struck by the sword, he did not manage to stop the bleeding in time, causing him to lose too much blood. He shook his head and said, "After this, third young master being able to preserve his life and live as an ordinary person is already a great blessing. Moreover, if there is any intense activity in the future, you will feel dizzy and your internal organs will feel as if they are on fire. Even your life will be in danger." Jun Tian was stunned and his expression changed. "It's that serious? Does the divine doctor have any means of recuperating? Is there no hope of a full recovery?" Fang Huixing sighed and said, "As the saying goes, there is a limit to one's strength. Even though I am hailed as a divine doctor, I don't really have the ability to connect with the god. With the current situation, even if the gods were to reincarnate, I'm afraid they would be powerless. Old Master Jun, you wish for your son to become a dragon. Everyone shares the same sentiment. Although it is an earnest matter, you should still act according to your capabilities." As he spoke, he picked up the brush and wrote a prescription, saying, "Follow this prescription, cut it 3 times a day, and nurse it carefully. You might be able to recover a little, but as for the cultivation of Xian Qi, I believe there is no hope for it in this lifetime." Grandpa Jun was dumbstruck. Even Tang Yuan was dumbfounded. However, who would dare to doubt the words that came out of the mouth of this medical magnate? Who had the right to doubt it? With a forced laugh, Jun Tian's face darkened as he said, "Being able to preserve my life without becoming handicapped and being able to move freely like an ordinary person is good enough. As for Xian Qi, there are countless people in Tianxiang Kingdom who have never come into contact with it in their entire lives, but aren't they still able to achieve great things?" Although he said that, even Tang Yuan could hear the disappointment in the old man's voice. Tang Yuan comforted him, "That's right. Just like our current imperial tutor Li, isn't he just a weak scholar? Isn't he still able to move unhindered in the imperial court, second only to 1 and above tens of thousands?" Fatty Tang's words were originally meant to be a compliment, but he did not expect Grandpa Jun to become enraged when he heard it, thinking that Fatty was scolding him in a roundabout way. One must know that Imperial Tutor Li Xian Qi was personally crippled by Jun Tian, which led to an unresolvable enmity between the 2 families, an enmity that could never be resolved. Scram! Grandpa Jun roared. Fatty Tang was frightened by Grandpa Tang's words, and his whole body trembled. He was so scared that he pissed his pants and ran away. He didn't know how he had offended Grandpa Tang. He was obviously following Grandpa Tang's words. Fang Huixing sighed, packed up his medicine box and took his leave. Grandpa Jun arranged for a few guards to send him back, but he himself sat by his grandson's bedside without moving. This action caused Fang Huixing to curse in his heart. What a huge difference in treatment between coming and going. Turning around, he found that Jun Moxie was still laughing. Grandpa Jun sighed and said angrily, "What are you laughing at, kid? This old man spent so much effort to get Thousand Li Shadowless to follow you and protect you, but you did it. You thought you were smart and used all sorts of methods to get rid of him, but in the end you ended up like this. Look at you, what should I say to you?" Sigh. Grandpa Jun shook his head and sighed, feeling that he had used up all the sighs he could have in this lifetime. "Grandpa, please be at ease." Jun Moxie looked at the deep concern on Jun Tian's face, and felt his heart warm. He could not bear to hide it from him any more, and said, "Just now, Mr. Fang's diagnosis was a result of me tampering with it. Actually, my body is not as serious as he said." After saying that, he chuckled and activated his Xian Qi. The sickly look on his face was instantly swept away, and he became radiant. Jun Zhan Tian's expression shook, and a burst of extreme ecstasy surged onto his face. But then, before the ecstasy could spread, it was covered with a layer of doubt and a little bit of understanding. "I want to hear your reasoning." "Anything, even your thoughts." Jun Zhan Tian's eyes became very sharp, and he looked at Jun Moxie, as if trying to figure out what this grandson of his was thinking. At the same time, Jun Zhan Tian turned his head and shouted, "From now on, within a radius of 300 feet from this room, I will not allow anyone with ears to exist. Anyone who disobeys will be killed without mercy." A reply was heard from outside, followed by a continuous schwa-schwa sound. In just a moment, the outside seemed to have become completely silent, and not a single sound could be heard. Hiding it from the imperial physician meant that he was lying to the emperor. Therefore, Jun Zhan Tian was very careful. Jun Moxie, who was lying down, suddenly sat up. He was still wearing his pajamas. He tightened the belt around his waist and got off the bed. Then, he sat down on the armchair opposite his grandfather, Jun Zhan Tian. This action made Grandpa Jun pleasantly surprised. It seemed that his grandson's body was indeed fine. This grandson really had good methods. Even the world's #1 divine physician, Fang Huixing, had been deceived by him. However, Grandpa Jun's face immediately turned solemn. He had a premonition that what Jun Moxie was going to say next was going to be very serious, and it might even be something that he did not want to hear. In fact, it might even be a little disgraceful. Thus, Grandpa Jun had long ago isolated any information from this room. Unless there was the legendary Great Master Shen Xian hiding and eavesdropping, no one would be able to hide from Grandpa Jun's eyes and ears. From Jun Moxie's many years of forbearance to his current feigned injury, Grandpa Jun could smell that something was amiss. He could even roughly guess what his grandson was going to say. Thus, he became especially solemn. "Because the Jun family is currently in a very dangerous situation, I had no choice but to step forward. My original intention was to live a life of debauchery." Jun Moxie opened his mouth, but first removed himself. "Unfortunately, I am the only one left in the 3rd generation of the Jun family. Even if I wanted to stay out of this, I can't. Thus, I must not enter the eyes of all the great families within the capital. I understand this point, and I have also guessed it." Grandpa Jun stroked his beard. "Based on this point alone, your feigning injury is very successful. I am very gratified. Also, Grandfather's previous actions may have intimidated all the great families within the capital, but the Jun family's strength has been revealed. Regardless of whether it is in the imperial court or in the shadows, they are too powerful. This kind of strength is something that the imperial family cannot tolerate. At the same time, this matter is also a huge taboo. However, first, it coincidentally catered to His Majesty's intentions. Pushing the boat with the current, it allowed His Majesty to complete the reshuffle of power within the capital. Second, His Majesty took into account Grandfather's past friendship and countless contributions. Third, Grandfather is already very old. Third uncle is seriously injured and crippled. This grandson is a good-for-nothing debauchee. Thus, His Majesty's suspicions were averted. However, this kind of thing can only happen once. This time, I barely managed to get away with it. Next time might not be the same. Even now, if His Majesty were to find out that this grandson's debauchery was just a facade of serious injuries, his suspicions would increase. When that time comes, I fear that the Jun family would immediately face a calamity. This is the biggest reason why I pretended to be injured. Chapter 82. Jun Jean Tian remained silent, but he was secretly nodding in his heart. He was completely disheartened by what had happened a few days ago. He had planned to perish together with the Emperor, but His Majesty had stopped him. Moreover, his grandson had returned safe and sound. His mood had naturally changed. If it was not the Jun family, any other family would have been flattened, even if they had catered to His Majesty's wishes. Thinking about it now, it was truly thrilling and frightening. Grandfather, there is no doubt that you are loyal to the royal family. But that is only you, Jun Moxie said. Although the Jun family appears to be the most powerful family in the world, the Jun family's power is dependent on His Majesty's imperial decree. Once this imperial decree is issued, the Jun family will collapse in an instant. I am not used to this. I believe that even third uncle may not be used to it. I have never been used to having my fate in the hands of others. That is why I would rather be a debauchee for the rest of my life. But now that my debauchee life has come to an end, I need to change. And the premise of this change is, I need to control the Jun family in my own hands. Jun Moxie looked at Jun Jean Tian. This is my highest goal, my ultimate plan, and the foundation of all my plans. Controlling one's fate in one's own hands. For you to have such thoughts, it means that you are showing signs of rebellion. Grandpa Jun's body trembled as he looked at him sternly. Grandfather, you have misunderstood. In my opinion, those who want to be emperors and those who have already become emperors are fools. Especially those who are determined to become emperors. They are the fools among fools. Jun Moxie snorted. Even if you have the power to overturn the world, even if you have 3,000 beauties, it is all meaningless to me. I have no interest at all. You! Grandpa Jun was so angry that his chest heaved up and down. His white beard was blown into a mess. For the loyal Grandpa Jun, these words had undoubtedly insulted his most loyal subject. If the one who spoke was not Jun Moxie, he would have died 17 or 18 times over. Grandfather, a straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. Let me make it clear today. His Majesty would never allow the Jun family to possess such great strength and outstanding descendants. That was a great threat to the throne. Father, second uncle, and my 2 brothers' deaths, I will investigate it clearly sooner or later. If there are any mysteries behind it, I might have to seek justice. Jun Moxie said calmly. All right, since I've admitted that I'm Jun Moxie, I naturally have to do something for this family. And this matter is probably the Jun family's biggest worry. Grandpa Jun sighed dejectedly. After pondering for a long time, he stood up, turned around and said, when the former emperor established the Tianxiang kingdom, he intentionally moved several of the great families of the kingdom to Tianxiang City, bestowing them with high positions. This method has 2 advantages. First, all the great families are gathered together, making it easier to control. Second, all the great families keep each other in check, making it easier to maintain a balance of power. Only in this way can the imperial family gain control of the situation. At present, in Tianxiang City, with the exception of the Yi family, the Jun family, Li family, Dugu family, Mu Rong family, and the Tang family each occupy their own territory. In recent years, the Meng family and the Song family have also been added. But in the end, they're nothing more than clowns, and they can't be compared to the great clans mentioned earlier. The military is led by the Jun family and the Dugu family. Although the Mu Rong family wants to meddle in the military, as long as Dugu Zongheng and I are around, they will never be able to interfere. On the surface, the Li and Meng families are our biggest rivals. They are constantly thinking of ways to bring each other down. Moreover, these 2 families are related by marriage. Among the younger generation of the Li family, there is a talented Li Yuan. Naturally, they are a bigger threat. The Song family has always kept a low profile, so we can ignore them for now. The Jun family and the Dugu family are rivals in the military. Usually we have small squabbles. That old bastard Dugazongheng is not convinced by me. But this is not the main point. The main point is that although our two families keep each other in check, we are both loyal to the imperial family. So, we will never really have a falling out. You have to keep this in mind. This is also the reason why the Jun family can stand tall in the imperial court. Among the great families, the Mu Rong family is the most ambitious. You must be wary of them, but you don't have to be deliberate. These great families all have their own schemes. Once the time comes for a real purge, everything will be revealed. Everything will be revealed on the surface, but before that happens, no matter what happens, we will all live in harmony with each other. This is the unspoken principle of the Zhu clan. So, now is the time when you youngsters are stirring up trouble. Everyone is watching you youngsters make trouble. Even if the trouble is a bit outrageous, everyone will just laugh it off. But at the same time, everyone is paying attention to you youngsters. They want to see which of the youngsters is the most threatening. Grandpa is very pleased that you are able to see this clearly. Grandpa Jun avoided Jun Moxie's topic of investigating the deaths of the two generations of the Jun family. Instead, he began to analyze the situation within the capital. 3 years ago, His Majesty had intended to appoint a crown prince, but after a series of tests, he had no choice but to give up on this idea. He allowed the 3 princes to fight amongst themselves while he hid behind the scenes and watched as his 3 sons made trouble. His Majesty had always believed that all 3 of his sons were wolves, but in the competition between the 3 wolves, there will always be a king, and the final victor will be His Majesty's successor. Jun Moxie sneered, but did not say anything. Grandpa Jun smiled bitterly and shook his head. But a wolf will always be a wolf. It will never transform into a tiger, nor will it transform into a dragon. Even if it is the Wolf King, it will still follow the path of a wolf. However, His Majesty clearly does not have a better choice. He could only force them again and again, oppress them again and again. But at the same time, intimidate them again and again, tame them again and again. Of course, the old foxes of the various families have noticed this. For the sake of their own families, they would not easily intervene in the disputes between the princes. However, within each family there will always be someone who is very close to one of the princes. Imperceptibly, a balance has been maintained. At present the 3 princes are not involved at all. The first is my Jun family, the second is the Dugu family, and the third is the Li family. Grandpa Jun spoke in a seemingly inexplicable manner, completely unrelated to what Jun Moxie had said. It seemed as though he was talking to himself, but at the same time, it also seemed as though he was talking to Jun Moxie. After saying that, he finally came to a conclusion. So, as long as you know what you intend to do and don't go overboard, I will cooperate and do whatever I want. After saying that, Grandpa Jun stood up tiredly and said, Right now, I have no choice but to recognize my old age. I can only watch from the side. Your third uncle's body crippled. The Jun family can only depend on your actions. No matter what happens, as long as you have a plan in mind and don't let the Jun family fall into eternal damnation, it will be fine. Jun Moxie's eyes lit up. He had keenly grasped the meaning of Grandpa Jun's last sentence. Do whatever I want. This sentence had a profound meaning. No wonder he gave me an analysis of the situation in the capital. It turns out that this was the main part of the plot. That meant that you can do whatever you want. The Jun family will support you but will not participate. However, if something happens, I will still be responsible for fishing you out. However, when he mentioned third uncle's disability, why did he pause for a moment? This question was immediately answered. Jun Zhantian's eyes carried a gratified expression as he looked at his grandson. As for your third uncle's leg, if you really have a way, then hurry up. No matter what the final result is, do not drag it out. Chapter 83. Grandpa June happily vented his anger and walked out with his hands clasped behind his back. As soon as he walked out, the smile on his face instantly became as dark as water. Everyone who saw it could not help but shiver in fear. Just from the look on Grandpa June's face, it seems that the third young master is completely hopeless. Even if he is not a cripple, he is almost there. Can't you see that Grandpa June's face is as black as the bottom of a pot? Tang Yuan returned home and reported to old Master Tang what had happened. Grandpa June sighed endlessly. He did not expect that the only descendant of the June family, a family of generals, could only turn to the path of a civil official. It is really sad and lamentable. As for the matter of Grandpa June's sudden anger, Tang Yuan hemmed and hawed. Sure enough, old Master Tang was also furious. Idiot! What nonsense are you spouting when you don't know? That old fart Li Shang was punched in the dantian by Jun Zhantian. Get lost. How could Tang Yuan not know that his flattery had gone too far? He immediately covered his head and scampered away like a rat. In less than a day, the news of the Jun family's third young master Jun Moxie had spread throughout the capital. Some time ago, there was a rumor that Jun Moxie, one of the capital's hedonistic sons, had turned over a new leaf at home. Every family had heard of it. However, this news was a little too shocking. Some people even launched secret investigations into the matter and investigated many of Jun Moxie's past actions. Of course, Jun Moxie was not scary. Even if he was scary, he was just a young boy. What was scary was that the Jun family had a successor, a rising star. Today, when this heavy and sorrowful news spread out, many people immediately breathed a sigh of relief. It even became a laughingstock, a topic of conversation after a meal. A playboy suddenly turned over a new leaf, and walked on the right path. Then, after training himself for a few days, he directly crippled himself. Before he worked hard, he still had some qi cultivation, but now he was completely crippled. Was there anything funnier than this in the world? As for the authenticity of this news, no one doubted it anymore. This was because both sources were authentic and authoritative. Jun Moxie's hardcore friend, Tang Yuan, had witnessed it with his own eyes and spread the news. The #1 imperial physician in the palace, Fang Huixing, also known as Mr. Immortal, personally diagnosed the illness. Who dared to doubt it? Who would doubt it? Who in these noble families did not care about their lives? Fang Huixing was the life insurance for these people when they were sick or injured. Befriending Fang Huixing was equivalent to having an extra life. If anyone dared to say, "I doubt the words of Fang Godly Doctor," in less than half a day, this person would drown in his own saliva. In fact, not to mention a mere Jun Moxie, even Grandpa June himself would not be able to play tricks in front of Miracle Dr. Fang. I didn't expect that Jun Moxie would be like this. Something's not right. In the Grand Preceptor's mansion, Li Yuran looked at the three people in front of her and frowned slightly. Li Feng, are you sure that these words were really said by Miracle Dr. Fang himself? I am sure. An old voice came from outside and the Grand Preceptor, Li Shang, walked in shakily. Facing his own grandson, Grand Preceptor Li's face was full of joy. Jun Zhantian, so what if you are an arrogant old man? But your Jun family is destined to decline. This is something that even the gods can't change. Jun Emosia is walking the path of a civil servant. Not to mention the fact that he's a good-for-nothing. Even if he were a genius, would we give him the opportunity to rise? You must know that all the civil servants of the empire are in the hands of our families. Li Yuran smiled and said, since grandfather is so sure, then the Jun family is no longer a threat to us. Li Shang nodded and warned, so from now on, do not provoke Jun Zhantian. This old thing will really kill people. As he said this, he gave Li Yuran a warning look. Li Yuran had been slapped and kicked by Jun Zhantian in front of everyone. Although Grand Preceptor Li knew that his grandson could endure it, he also knew that Li Yuran was a vengeful person. Although she didn't mention it and didn't show it on her face, she would never let it go. She would definitely take revenge if there was an opportunity. And now, Li Shang's intention was to persuade Li Yuran to give up on this idea of revenge. After all, the current Jun Zhantian was a half-mad old lion that no one could afford to provoke in the entire empire. Especially now that His Majesty was protecting him, he couldn't afford to offend him at all costs. Furthermore, Jun Zhantian had revealed the Jun family's hidden strength in a fit of rage last night. It was truly shocking. In the face of such strength, no matter which family it was, if they were to rashly clash head-on, they would be badly injured. Jun Zhantian could even exterminate some of the weaker clans in a single night. That was not a difficult thing to do. Li Yuran narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "Don't worry, grandfather. I won't do such an unwise thing. But it's Jun Moxie. It's not a big deal to play with him once in a while, right? A person who has just lost his Xian Qi cultivation will definitely indulge in wine and women. As for the matters between the younger generation, grandfather and Jun Zhantian won't care too much." Li Shang smiled and said, "Just don't go too far." The four grandsons agreed in unison. In the imperial palace, His Majesty the Emperor reclined on the dragon throne with a soft cushion behind him. Chapter 84. A few days later, Grandpa Jun suddenly became interested and ordered people to carry out a large-scale construction in the garden of the Jun residence. Countless flowers were uprooted and a tower-shaped building was erected. It was 7 stories high and a sentry tower was placed at the top to monitor the movements in the surroundings. When he had nothing to do, Grandpa Jun would often bring his men to patrol the residences of the officials near the Jun residence. In the middle of the night, the sound of horses' hooves would suddenly resound and deafening battle cries would resound. Grandpa Jun was using his remaining energy to train his troops. However, this training did not matter. In the next few days, the officials near the Jun residence became more and more alarmed. In the end, they did not hesitate to spend a lot of money to buy new houses and move away. Then, without waiting for anyone to move in, Grandpa Jun gave the order and all the mansions were razed to the ground. Since he had nothing to do, Grandpa Jun began to train the guards of the mansion as if they were regular soldiers. Then, the Jun family's external procurement staff revealed that when Grandpa Jun had nothing to do, he would often drink to drown his sorrows and get drunk. Everyone understood this point. No matter who it was, to suddenly fall into despair when they saw hope, they would not be able to bear it. Fortunately, Grandpa Jun's alcohol tolerance was not bad and he did not go around drinking to act crazy. This could be considered a blessing in misfortune. In fact, everyone could understand in the midst of his disappointment towards his grandson, he suddenly saw hope for his grandson to turn over a new leaf, but just as he saw hope, he received news of his grandson's death. Just as he was about to fall into despair, he received news that his grandson was still alive. Just as he received news that his grandson was still alive, before he could even rejoice, he was told that his grandson had become a cripple. Isn't this deliberately toying with people? Even if one's mental fortitude was strong, to be able to withstand such a violent upheaval was already an admirable feat. Putting themselves in Grandpa Jun's shoes, if they were to encounter such a thing, they would have long since collapsed. Their performance would not even be as good as Grandpa Jun's. Thus, they were not surprised by Grandpa Jun's various abnormalities. The pitiful old thing was being toyed with by the heavens. It was already good enough that he hadn't gone mad. Do whatever you want as long as you don't do anything to me. Almost everyone had the same thought. Even the emperor, who had always been wise, more or less had the same thought. In the courtyard of the Jun family, which was recognized as a forbidden area by everyone, Jun Moxie was smiling happily as he poured a glass of wine for Junwui. The wine was refreshing and fragrant. It was so clear that one could see the bottom of the glass. I didn't expect Emosia to have such ability. This wine was truly a peerless wine. The ones I drank before were truly trash. Junwui took a sip and narrowed his eyes in an intoxicated manner. In another corner, four burly warriors were wielding iron hammers and blowing bellows as they did the work of blacksmiths. The blazing flame was so hot that it was almost silver white. A large piece of iron was burned red. Then, they took it out and raised their noses to sniff the fragrance of the wine in the air. At the same time, they fiercely swung their sledgehammers and hammered down again and again. Their bodies were drenched in sweat, but the piece of iron did not show any signs of change. It could be seen that this piece of iron had reached an unimaginable level of toughness. Young Master had said that as long as this piece of iron was hammered to his satisfaction every day, each of them would be rewarded with a pot of wine. Heavens, such good wine, even the Emperor himself might not have tasted it before. How could this not be a job for these four warriors who valued wine as much as their lives? Wine-making is just a small part of the acrobatic. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to drink it ourselves. It's really unbearable to drink that kind of bastard wine every day. Jun Moxie elegantly took a sip. He squinted his eyes and asked with interest, "Third uncle, I heard that when Grandpa drank this wine for the first time, he got drunk?" "I heard that, he got drunk." Junwui frowned and his face darkened as he lectured, "Don't talk about your elders behind their backs." Jun Moxie touched his nose and was still in high spirits. He did not give up and asked, "I heard that Grandpa sang when he got drunk? He even stuck his head in the pig's head and fell asleep? You brat. Are you looking for a beating? Don't you know that it's taboo to speak the truth?" Junwui was annoyed and amused at the same time. "Who asked you not to tell me that this wine is so strong? It's already good enough that your grandpa didn't come to settle the score with you. He had to wash his beard for the whole morning before he could wash it clean." "Oh." Jun Moxie gave a meaningful "oh" and smirked. "Grandpa doesn't seem to be a good drinker. Let's not talk about this anymore." Junwui felt a little uncomfortable and was not interested in discussing Grandpa Jun. "You, on the other hand, shouldn't you be preparing?" Jun Moxie's face suddenly turned bitter. He raised his glass and drank it in one gulp, letting out a long sigh. A few days ago, Grandpa Jun suddenly had a whimsical idea. Because Jun Moxie's xianqi cultivation was not high, Grandpa Jun was unable to find a sparring partner for him. I will leave the rest to my brothers and sisters. A third chapter in the afternoon. Chapter 85. Someone bought it? Jun Moxie suddenly became vigilant. He straightened his back and said, "That kind of medicine wouldn't be used if the meridians weren't blocked. How could it be bought at such a critical juncture? Could it be that the news was leaked and someone is targeting our Jun family?" "No." Junwui shook his head and said, "Even the person who was looking for the medicine doesn't know why he was looking for it. He doesn't know that it has anything to do with me. I don't think it's targeting me. But this coincidence is too much of a coincidence. Could it be that the heavens are making fun of me and won't let me recover?" Jun Moxie frowned and slowly paced back and forth. If only one of the 5 medicines was missing, Jun Moxie could use other methods to make up for it no matter what it was missing. But if 2 medicines were missing, "Third uncle, did you send an order to find out who stole the medicine before Third uncle did?" "We're already looking into it. But this matter has just happened, so we haven't found anything yet." Junwui smiled faintly. He didn't seem to be in a hurry. Instead, he comforted him. "Third uncle has waited for so many years. It doesn't matter if we wait for another month or 2. Don't worry, don't worry. June Moxie nodded heavily. He held the wine glass and thought about it in a daze. But, the more he thought about it, the more he felt clueless. Jun Wui saw that he was lost in thought. So, he didn't disturb him. He just poured himself a cup of wine and enjoyed himself. Jun Wui suddenly laughed when he heard the sound of familiar footsteps. Guan Qing Han was dressed in snow-white clothes. Her pretty face was covered with frost. She slowly walked over. As she gradually approached, June Moxie felt as if an iceberg was slowly pressing down on him. The delicate woman's body emitted a bone-chilling aura. It made people feel that even the heart of this fairy-like beauty in white had long been frozen. June Moxie had objected to the fact that Guan Qing Han was here to spar with him many times. He believed that with his fighting skills, the only thing he lacked was strength. In this world, if he claimed to be the second best at killing, no one would dare to claim to be the first. However, Grandpa June didn't know about this secret, and he couldn't let him know about it either. So, Grandpa June firmly rejected June Moxie's protest. Especially after witnessing Guan Qing Han's abuse on the first day, Grandpa June only said one sentence and left. That sentence was, "I am very satisfied, continue to beat me up." It was Jun Wui's first time seeing it, so of course he had to open his eyes wide to see clearly. For the past month, as an elder, he had repeatedly suffered losses at the hands of his nephew. Naturally, Jun Wui wouldn't let go of this pleasing opportunity to vent his anger. After all, such an opportunity was rare. "I really don't know how to fight," June Moxie wailed in his heart. Perhaps it should be said that June Moxie didn't dare to fight back. The hitman June had lived 2 lives. His hands were stained with blood. He could kill people with just a wave of his hand. He was extremely proficient in killing people. However, when it came to exchanging pointers with ordinary martial skills, not to mention those true killing moves, even those methods that could be used to subdue the enemy would easily injure the opponent's limbs. Hence, it was absolutely not allowed to be used. Especially when the opponent was his sister-in-law. Although this sister-in-law didn't like him, he couldn't kill her, right? Of course, he couldn't break her arms or legs. Even a normal dislocation would be a bit embarrassing for a woman. Moreover, there were some parts of a woman's body that were difficult to deal with unless they were mortal enemies. Since these methods couldn't be used, Jun Dashao didn't have many methods to deal with the enemy. Especially when he was facing his sister-in-law, whose Xian Qi cultivation was far above his own. The stronger one would be able to fight to their heart's content. However, the weaker one would have their hands and feet tied. The difference between the strong and the weak was irreversible. How could the hitman not exhaust all his tricks and complain incessantly? Guan Qing Han stood there quietly, like a snow lotus flower on an iceberg, aloof and unattainable, yet proud and aloof, pure and clean. "Can we not fight today?" June Moxie pitifully put forward a condition. "I can give you 2 more pots of wine, okay?" "Not good." Guan Qing Han's face was as cold as ever. She clapped her hands together, but a black gas came out. 9th level Xian Qi. "Are you ready?" Guan Qing Han looked at him without surprise or joy, as if she was looking at a human sandbag that could take a beating. "Bah, would you be so proactive if I didn't give you wine? God, are you kidding me? You actually gave this woman a legitimate opportunity to beat me up. I can't really fight back. Ready? What's the use of being ready?" June Moxie was very angry. His concealment from his grandfather had certainly brought about positive effect. That was, he had aroused his grandfather's hopes. But at the same time, it had also brought about negative effects. He had been deceived by his grandson for so many years. His grandfather must be very unhappy. Therefore, Guan Qing Han's test was completely arranged by his grandfather to mess with him. Perhaps it should be said that this was an overt plot. Unfortunately, he had to eat dumplings in silence. He knew what was going on, but he couldn't say it out loud. The most annoying thing was that he obviously had many ways to deal with this woman, but he couldn't use them. He could have easily dealt with her, but he had to endure the abuse. Was he a masochist? This was the most tragic thing in the world. He didn't know when his grandfather would revoke this punishment. Chapter 86. Based on the difference in mystical chi between Jun Moxie and Guan Qinghan, even if Guan Qinghan was hit by Jun Moxie in other parts of her body, he might not be able to cause any damage. However, the throat was one of the most vital and vulnerable parts of the human body, and the elbow was the strongest part of the human body. Using the sharpest part of the elbow to overcome the weakest part of the strong, he could defeat the strong with the weak. A one-hit kill. That was a decisive blow that could turn the tables. That was why Junwui was so shocked. Was Mo Xie really so brilliant? Or maybe it was just a coincidence. Junwui was doubtful, and he continued to watch the fight. Although Jun Moxie was being beaten, in Junwui's eyes, Jun Moxie only needed to use strength in every move, and every time, he would kill Guan Qinghan before she could hit Jun Moxie. Even more than once in a move. Junwui was silent. He observed carefully. This move Jun Moxie dodged at the right time. The middle finger of his raised fist had an obvious protrusion. If it was hit in a straight line, it would hit the back of Guan Qinghan's head. This was the most vulnerable part of the human body. If the protrusion of the middle finger hit the fusion point at the back of the head, this move, the position and movement of Jun Moxie's knee was different, and it was pointed. If he didn't retreat, it would be the fatal point of the genitals, heart, temple, coccyx, eyes, throat, behind the ears. Guan Qinghan was fighting to her heart's content, and she was in high spirits. Jun Mo Xie was struggling to dodge, and was complaining to the heavens. Jun Wu Yi, on the other hand, was watching from the side with fear and trepidation. This sweating was because of Guan Qinghan. After every few moves, Jun Wui would be afraid. Even with his eyesight, he had to take a while to judge the danger that Guan Qinghan was facing, and at this time, a few moves had passed. And Guan Qinghan was facing the call of death countless times, but she was still in high spirits, completely unaware of it. Jun Mo Xie's instinctive reaction and killing intent had been seen through by Jun Mo Xie every time he had forcefully retracted his attack. It was too scary, even with Third Master Jun's Earth Xian cultivation. He could not hold on. Too scary. As the saying goes, the onlooker sees clearly. The onlooker was not only clear, but also scared to death. In fact, he did not dare to rashly interrupt this subtle game of death. He was afraid that his words would disturb Jun Mo Xie. If that happened, Guan Qinghan would be killed in an instant if he didn't stop in time. Jun Moxie's movements were sharp and straightforward, and even Jun Wui would not be able to stop it in time. Finally, Jun Moxie was knocked to the ground 10 times, and Guan Qinghan felt that she had successfully completed her task. So, she did not say a word and apologized to Junwui. Then, she picked up the 2 pots of wine and walked away victoriously without looking back. From the beginning to the end, she was neither happy nor angry, and her face was as cold as ever. She did not sweat even after such violent movements, and it seemed that beating up Jun Moxie was a piece of cake for Guan Qinghan. After all, it was a high-level Xian beating a low-level mediocre person. Jun Wui stared blankly at Guan Qinghan's departure, and his heart was incomparably shocked. According to his calculations, in the fight just now, if it had been a real life-and-death struggle, Guan Qinghan would have died at least 47 times. And every time, Jun Moxie would be able to escape unscathed. This was a frightening number. One must know that Jun Moxie's Xian Qi was only at the 4th level, and Guan Qinghan's Xian Qi was already at the 9th level, and was about to break through to the silver level. Could it be that the legend of a low-level Xian being unable to defeat a high-level Xian would be broken by this nephew of his? No, this was already a fact. And the most frightening thing was that Jun Mo's actions were clearly subconscious and instinctive reactions. But every time he was about to attack, he would forcefully retract it. What did this mean? What did this mean? Jun Wui's entire body was drenched in cold sweat. This meant that Jun Moxie was already very familiar with killing, and when he made these movements, it was completely unconscious. He didn't even need to think or consider, and when he was attacked, he could naturally find the enemy's weakness and deliver a fatal blow. Killing was already an instinct. This was the only way such a situation could occur. How many people did he have to kill to hone such instinctive reactions? Even with Jun Wui's composure, he didn't dare to continue thinking about it. He was used to seeing valiant generals in the army, used to seeing people risking their lives on the battlefield, and even more used to bloody killings. He had experienced countless assassinations by cold-blooded killers, and even personally trained many killers. He had fought more than 100 battles in his life, and killed countless people, but he had never seen such a terrifying person. Monster? It was fine if he didn't make a move, but once he made a move, he killed. Killing had completely integrated into his instincts, and had become the first reflex reaction. And this terrifying, cruel, and demon-like monster was actually his own nephew. The nephew who was recognized as trash by the entire imperial capital. Jun Moxie. Jun Wui groaned and covered his eyes. What am I seeing? I must be dreaming. If this is a nightmare, then let me wake up quickly. Nightmare? If Mo possessed such strength, how could it be a nightmare? Or perhaps it was just a dream. At this moment, Jun Wui suddenly recalled the words Jun Moxie had said when he was begging Grandpa Jun to retract his order. Grandpa, I don't know how to fight. Really, I really don't know how to fight. The famous debauchee of the capital doesn't know how to fight? When he heard those words, Grandpa Jun's first reaction was to give Jun Moxie a ruthless kick on his buttocks. Then, he pointed at the door and roared, "Get out!" When Jun Wui heard those words, he nearly laughed out loud. For a long time, he couldn't help but laugh when he thought of those words. It was too funny. Not knowing how to fight could be understood as not knowing how to fight, but it could also be understood as and now, he finally understood the true meaning of those words. Jun Moxie really did not know how to fight, he only knew how to kill. This extremely pure killing technique had already melted into his blood, melted into his soul, and melted into every bone, every inch of muscle, and every nerve in his body. If a soldier on the battlefield possessed such a technique, even if he was surrounded by millions of soldiers, as long as he still had the strength, he would not fall. As for his enemies, they would be turned into corpses in a row. If an assassin in an assassin organization possessed such a technique, he would be able to succeed in every endeavor. He would be able to create a legend in the Xian continent. No matter who had that kind of technique, they could transform into the Grim Reaper that could steal lives. At such a level, killing had already become a habit, a kind of instinct, or a kind of pinnacle art, or even a supreme achievement. Just like a master craftsman who had mastered the art of painting, with a casual stroke of his brush, he would be able to create a masterpiece. Just like a master of music, with a casual flick of his hand, he would be able to create heavenly music. That was the dream of every soldier and assassin, but no one had ever reached the pinnacle of killing. But Jun Moxie, how could his nephew do it? How could it be Jun Moxie? A huge question appeared in Jun Wui's mind. Where did he learn it from? How did he master it? Most importantly, what did he use to cultivate it? Jun Wui felt that this nephew of his was becoming more and more unfathomable. Although his current cultivation level was only at the 4th level, but from his earlier performance, Jun Wui felt that he had to look up to him. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.